Hello. Okay. Now we have to wait for a couple of people to come in, I suppose, before we can figure out if it's working. But in the meantime, there we go. You are now live, and we have precisely 0 listeners. So I don't know whether the sound is good or not. Apparently, the interview I did with David apparently had less than stellar sound. So I was just hoping.
he was a bit quieter than you for the stream, but I mean, it was still
I
fine.
can't
You could still hear
tell.
you both.
Well, for anybody that's actually joining this after we've recorded it, probably skip ahead a minute or two. Oh well, we've got a human. We've got a human here. Hello, human. Tell us how the sound is, because we're just trying to make sure we don't screw this up again, or I don't screw this up again.
Well, screw
Although
up is
I blame
that's
Tony,
easy,
of
man.
course.
Well, I blame someone else, but we'll leave
Yeah,
that one.
I know we can't say. You have at least one listener. Good. How's the sound? Can you hear Tony and myself okay?
Testing 1, 2, testing 1. Yeah, is the balance okay on both sides, basically?
Yeah. Well, let's see. There's a couple of guys popping in, but I think they're
How's the
probably.
echo?
Sound is pretty good. Okay.
Happy days.
Sounds good. Miss SOJ. Okay. We might have some new listeners. I've basically said that pretty much any question, including stupid ones, are allowed. Of course, extreme gamma behavior will be punished by the usual means, but you will get one warning, which is unusual for me.
Dude, I'm already becoming so draconian with comments. I mean, on my like recent videos and stuff, when the moment I get even a slight bit of snark or something in one of the comments, it's just like done.
You're starting to
I'm not.
appreciate.
There's only just there's so much time in the day, mate.
Yeah.
There's so much work we can do before we get to purgatory, and I'm not gonna waste your time, and I'm not gonna let you waste mine. So it's
Yep.
just yeah, I know
It's
exactly
you're starting to
exactly what you mean.
understand. Like people used to complain about Vox because it was like, look, the comments section of the blog is there as a courtesy. You don't understand. I don't care about these. But once you start, if you have your own blog and stuff, then it becomes quite clear quite quickly why comments are
Yeah,
maybe.
because I always bought into that super classical liberal thing of, well, every bit of speech is allowed in all context,
Yeah,
and
I never did.
characters like volume for Tony could be improved.
Yeah,
Could be
could.
improved. Okay, so what do
Is
you?
it okay? Is it a bit too low or is it a bit too high?
Yeah, what's the crack there?
Yeah, so tell us if you want us to like jiggle with the volume. We're happy to do it, but we can't
Do you
tell.
have dials on your side then, G, for moving this stuff? Because obviously I'm static now. I can't
Uh,
change it on mine.
well, not really. I've got my built-in microphone and I got my sound effects, which I never use. What else have I got?
Or
But the only thing that made a difference was raising or lowering each other's volume. So
okay,
too low.
too
Okay, so
low.
it appears that you're too low. Tony's volume
I'm
about 6
too low.
decibel low. So try and raise
Uh,
your
how on earth am I supposed to do that? Okay.
on your
Um,
computer or PC or whatever. You should have like a. I haven't used the Windows computer in ages, but on the Mac you've always got a
all right, hang on. Yeah.
sound thing up. Audio is loud on Kurgan's side. Okay, let's see if I can make that a bit lower. Is that better? Tony's volume is low but clear, 3x5.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's good at least. At least I'm using the right microphone. Um,
Okay, you sound a bit lower to me now, Tony, than you did before, but maybe that's just
weird.
me.
Microphone setup. Voice speed. Oh, I don't want to change that.
Okay, guys, give us a vote out of 10 and tell us who should be lower or higher.
Hang on. Maybe if I take this off, this might have to increase the quality as well.
And yeah, for those people that are just tuning in after we've recorded it, skip
How
ahead.
does that sound now, lads? How does that sound now?
Miss SOJ says,
Do
my
tell
church
me.
is one Latin Mass. Confession is on Saturday, and there was order in the afternoon. As confession right before service become blessing. No, it hasn't.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It's always
Okay.
the norm from
We'll,
every
we'll,
city
we'll
church
get
I've
to your
been to.
question, Miss SOJ. But look, guys, if you don't tell us, we don't know. So if the sound is terrible, let us know, please. If you need Tony to still be a bit higher or a bit lower.
To be honest, I think what I've just done is about, well, actually no, what I could
Tony
do
is solid now. Tony higher. Good.
Happy days.
Okay.
Happy days.
So,
All right.
without further ado on the sound, because it's always irritating to get that right. Basically, what we wanted to do, and I haven't had a chance to add it in the notes, but I will as soon as we finish recording. Tony did an excellent, I think it's like, what, 7-minute video?
8 minutes.
8-minute, brilliant video. Yeah, the wind sound is my fan, and I'm not going to switch that off because otherwise I'll melt. I can lower it down a bit though. And I can maybe angle it that way so it's not directly onto the mic. Is that any better? Better now, okay. Yeah, so he did a brilliant 8-minute video, which is basically like sedevacantism. Even if it's wrong, it's right, and it's beautiful. Because basically what he does is he takes, I think it's Lumen Gentium, or he takes one of the truly heretical documents of Vatican II. Well, there's 15 of them, well 16 actually, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's Unitatis and it's Lumen. So
yeah, so he takes the fact that, you know, the Vatican II documents are basically saying, oh, we're all brothers and sisters in God, and you know, you're a Muslim or a Buddhist or, you know, some Satanist or slight Freemason. It's okay, you're still saved, you're still part of the church. So Tony is saying, well, you know, and he takes excerpts, I believe, from the documents, and he goes, well, if this is the case, well then surely we sedevacantists are fine, so why not be a sedevacantist? And it's very, very interesting. It's a brilliant little video. You should go and check it out. It's done in Tony's usual very direct and sort of slightly humorless style, but it's not humorless at all, because if you understand the context, it's hilarious. So it's just, he's got his steady, you know, Attenborough type voice, but the context is brilliant. And now, interestingly enough, I was going to bring up a point that actually Adam brought up on his blog. Adam Piggott.
Yeah, he did a great post today. He did a really good post today.
It's a brilliant post. So those of you that don't know, it's pushingrubberdownhill.com. Go and check out his latest post on sedevacantism. And he brought up something that I was going to bring up in this. You know, I wanted to do an interview with you again to bring it up, but he mentioned it in his blog post, which is, isn't it strange how the Pope goes to lick some Muslim guy's feet and goes to the church and, you know, washes their toes and whatever to everybody. But when it comes to sedevacantists, he actually hired in Italian, I should have, I don't know if I still have the book here or whether it's packed away, but he actually, the Vatican essentially engaged this journalist, this Italian journalist, to write this book called Sedevacantisti, and it's basically an attempted takedown of sedevacantism, and it's hilarious. If you read that and you know anything at all about all the fake popes and the church history and whatever, it's actually hilarious. He's got so little places to go that he just has to. He actually does that thing where it's like. You know, he takes something that is clearly on the sedevacantist side and then tries to pretend like it isn't. It's almost like, well, yeah, child rape is bad because we're not doing it enough, you know, that sort of thing. It's like, what? You know, he comes up with these thoughts about, you know, the various fake popes and what they said, and oh, you know, sedevacantism can't be right because, oh, you know, and it's tragic. So, and apart from that, Adam just mentioned that where in his church near there, the Novus Ordo Church didn't let a sedevacantist who passed away be buried in church grounds. Now, as a sedevacantist, as per Adam's blog, I don't care at all about stuff like that, because as far as I'm concerned, that Novus Ordo Church has been desacralized. So in order for it to become holy ground, it would have to actually come back into the possession of the actual Catholic Church, which is the sedevacantists, and have to be reconsecrated, because the people that took it over are not Catholics. They're the opposite of Catholics. They're essentially Satanists. So as at a minimum, you'd want to do that just out of prudence, but probably they would have done all sorts of sick things. I mean, if people knew what actually goes on in the Vatican, well, I mean, we don't have to pretend or guess what goes on, because it was on all the newspapers in Italy not too long ago. They had homosexual cocaine-fueled orgies. Like, this is like the number 2 guy sort of in his house after the Pope. It's basically his right-hand man and his henchmen, and God knows how many fake priests all having cocaine-fueled homo orgies there. So not quite the Catholic Church as we would call it. And there's things that go on in the Sistine Chapel that are just, I'm not going to bother mentioning them because I don't have,
It's a Sunday, mate.
Yeah, exactly. But, so everybody's okay except the sedevacantists. I mean, Bergoglio's worst pronouncements have been reserved for the so-called trads. And when he says trads, he's trying to pretend it's like the guys who are after the Latin Mass, but really he's definitely concentrating and focusing on us, on the sedevacantists. So now ask yourself, if Clown World is utterly and totally against you, you must be doing something right. Keep in mind also that the FBI had, and it wasn't, they tried to pretend it was, just this one office in Butthole, Alabama or whatever, and it wasn't. It was throughout all the offices. There was a memo that went out that traditional Catholics should be considered as terrorists. We're like the most sort of peaceful guys. I mean, where's the terrorism with hardcore Catholics? The only thing that you could potentially even hint at as being, violent is we have the concept of just war, the death penalty, and defending innocence. So if somebody's trying to kill you, you're allowed to kill them back. I mean, how's that?
Living in the UK, that is basically terrorism.
Oh yeah, of course.
If someone comes into my house and tries to stab my wife with a sword or something, I've got to just stand there and say, "Oh, hello, sir. Would you like a cup of tea?"
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's
obviously, as an Englishman, I would offer him a cup of tea anyway, because it's kind of, it's basically like a nervous tick now as an Englishman.
Yes, but a few hundred years ago, the cup of tea was after you killed the intruder, to settle the nerves.
Yeah, no, I'll put it on his grave afterwards, at least. That is really, I think. But you can.
Don't get me wrong, if an intruder, I mean, that's all of Europe. I mean, and even in the States, it's starting to become where, if a guy invades your house and you turn his head into a pink cloud, you end up going to jail. I mean, don't get me wrong. After you've turned his head into a pink cloud, by all means, say a Hail Mary over his dead corpse. After you kick it out into the nearest hole. But, because the soul is not in the body, so, hey. But, I mean, it's like you go looking for stuff, you're going to find it. That's the, so what Tony did was a brilliant expose, which I think any so-called cradle Catholic, Churchian, Novus Ordo type, it's going to turn their heads into improvised explosive devices, because they can't get away from, what he's saying. It's perfectly logical, makes perfect sense, it's totally acceptable. So that was quite a brilliant sort of view of it. So in case you're doubtful, just become a sede. You're saved anyway, right?
Exactly. So it's literally a win-win situation, because if the Novus Ordo Church really is the true Church of Christ, well, they've said, well, we're all saved anyway, so get involved. And like I said at the end of the video, if you do become sede, there's a bunch of perks. Obviously, you've got to travel a little bit further for Mass, but it's not exactly the Crusades. But you get to actually have a really nice liturgy for once.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about gays and guitars and stuff serving the Mass. You can you don't have to go into horrific, awful modernist churches, especially with the new architecture and stuff that they've got. and you can just get everything good about having a nice traditional Catholic life, which we all
Yeah,
enjoy.
you also don't
And
have
get salvation thrown in as well.
you also
Avoid
don't
the
have
emotion.
to suffer through rainbow-clad dancing dervishes pretending to do the mass. It's
It's always
quite
a bonus. It's always a
yes,
bonus. Yeah. So the only thing that I have come across is, because obviously it's an 8-minute video, so I've got to try and be concise.
yeah.
And there's a lot of people who would talk about, well, you haven't really interpreted this exact quote and exact rate and that kind of thing. And there's two parts to that. It's firstly, I try to cover everything more extensively in my longer video on sedevacantism,
Yeah,
which is sedevacantism visualized, right? And that is actually much more thorough. 'Cause
that's
that,
like what 7 parts or something.
yeah, I've split it up into an entire, so you can either watch it as a single video, which is in
Yeah.
total about an hour long, or I've broken it down into sections, so it's like a 7-part little mini
That-
series.
That's the good thing about Tony. He does these short things, unlike me.
And so what I try to explain there is the actual depths of the argument. But the thing that bugs me is that when it comes to a lot of these criticisms, it always strikes me as a wood through the trees type situation, right?
Yeah.
Where they'll say, well, this exact quote could be misinterpreted or reinterpreted in this way. It's not exactly what the Pope meant, and it does look like taken out of context. And so just step back for a second, though, right? You're literally worshipping with like Native Americans, Hindus, and Muslims. Like they're literally singing in the churches, doing their prayers. So
It's not just that. They've had, at the Vatican, they've had a ritual for Pachamama, which, if you look into it, Pachamama is basically a demon that eats children. So,
yeah.
and there's all like cardinals and whatever all around. There's pictures of this. It's not like we're saying it happened. It happened. It's a real thing. It took
Exactly.
place.
It's consistent practice of not, because this is the other thing as well. They might an over-sort of apologist might look at the particular quotes and say, well, it's only the quotes that may be saying this from one of the documents or whatever. It's like, yeah, but the popes and the clergy in the hierarchy are consistently following this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just the case. I mean, one of the biggest strawmans against sedevacantism is like, oh, you just don't like the current so-called Pope Francis, right? And it's like, well, it's not just like he's a problem, right? But that's just scratching the surface. Like, if you go back, it's not just Francis who sat there and had a demon ritual done to him. Like, it was also, Benedict XVI from JP2 had also had all this stuff done.
Well, let's call them by their proper name, Razzi the Nazi, and what's the other guy? Like Wiccan, as I call him.
Wojtyla or something.
Yeah. They don't have vowels in that language, so.
But so it's not just that this stuff is written.
Sorry to interrupt, mate. Just a very quick. Both Wojtyla, fake Pope John Paul II, and Ratzinger, fake Benedict the 16th or whatever, both of them did a blessing in a Freemasonic church. So, and of course Montini, which was, he put in 14 of those 16 heretical documents. And Roncalli, which was the first one, before he died, he approved and finalized 2 of those documents. Inter Mirifica, which technically doesn't have direct heresy in it, and the other one, which does. So, as with most anti-popes, he's been declared an anti-pope after his death. But that's par for the course, really. Indeed. So sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, that's fine, because one of the things I've tried to focus on in my recent works on this stuff is that I actually think the issue of the individual heresies of the popes is kind of secondary importance.
No, wait, hold on. It's not individual heresy. That's another thing. If a pope is an individually heretic, occult heretic, you can't know that. You don't know that.
Exactly.
It's got nothing to do with that. The pope could be raping little children every other week, and you don't know of it, or you suspect it, but that doesn't mean one thing or the other. Doctrine, which is ex cathedra, which is official doctrine of the Catholic Church, which contravenes the original doctrine of Catholic Church that is immutable over 2 millennia, doing that's what makes you an anti-pope. I mean, exactly. We've had Borgia popes that had orgies, we've had like gay popes, we've had like all sorts of ridiculously flawed human beings as popes. There are still valid popes. They were valid popes. Nobody said they're anti-popes. The anti-popes come in when they try and affect the actual dogma of the Catholic Church, when they try and change that or go against that, then they become anti-pope. So it's a very clear line, which of course the deniers try and confuse on purpose. So they say, "Oh, it's just a bad pope. We've had bad popes before. It's got nothing to do with
Yeah,
it."
again, it's a massive straw man version
Yeah.
of sedevacantism, where they only think that we're rebelling against or rejecting the mistakes of people like Francis, which we are, but that's just, again, it's coming down from something else. It's not just because we think that Francis is bad. It's that
I'm not even.
the
First of all, I
entire-
don't call him Francis because I think that's a slur on the actual,
That's fair.
Saint Francis. His name
Yeah.
is Jose Bergoglio,
Okay.
and I wouldn't even call Maria because I think that's just it's a badly applied, fake, catechized name. But Bergoglio is. We say, oh, he's a bad pope, he's a bad guy. I don't consider him. He's not a Catholic. He's nothing. He's a Satanist pretending to play a role. So
Well, this is what I was going to mention in relation to Adam's
Yeah.
article, because the general idea of that is like, look, this is all burning down, but
Yeah.
kind of, it's not a nihilistic let it burn type thing. But the
Not
way
at
I
all.
would have phrased it is like, when people tell me, oh, can you believe that Bergoglio did this, or can you believe that the Novus Ordo Church has done that? It's like tell me about fights between Sunni and Shiite Muslims. Like, I care about as much as that.
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah,
care about
exactly.
problems in the Novus Ordo Church. Like, oh, great, the Dalai Lama's done something crazy as well today. Cool.
Yeah.
It's
Who
just
cares?
not-
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not our religion. So
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
do you realize this crazy, horrible stuff these Satanists are doing? It's like, well, they are Satanists.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, people don't, and that attitude actually upsets the churchians. It upsets them, but even more so, it upsets the deniers, the deceivers. It like drives them up the wall. When you're like, hey, you're not I had a fake priest come to my door. I may have told the story before. Stop me if you've heard it, but it's like the guy comes up and I heard a knock on the door, and I go up there and there's this fake priest. Says, "Oh, hi, it's a time of blessing the houses, so we go around to bless houses." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I've got a priest." You go, but I'm the priest in this village. I'm like, nah. And I just, with a smile on my face, like, "No, you're not a priest. You're Novus Ordo. You're a fake priest. I know what you are. You know what you are, and I know that you know that I know what you are. So what do you want to do? You want to have a coffee, but you're certainly not blessing my house because you're not a priest." And like, oh, and he like, he's just used to like people allowing him in, so he sort of goes like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll take a coffee." I was like, good, so we can have a quick chat before I kick you out again. And he's like, well, it's not about, nobody has to convince anybody. And I laughed at him. I physically laughed. And I go like, there is no chance that you're going to convince me of the lies and denials that you schooled yourself into. You know very well that Vatican II has got nothing to do with Catholicism. So, apparently the Novus Ordo Church owns some land around here. How much do you guys want for it? It was like, you're like, oh, I don't know, I'll try and find out. Yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you'll get back to me real soon. And, that was it. He like, never seen or heard from him again. So
one idea that comes to mind there is I've recently started taking the practice of actually going to church to pray.
Yeah.
Now, you might say, well, that's crazy because there's no sedevacantist churches. Like, well, no, there's plenty of Catholic churches. They're just full of the wrong people, right?
Yeah.
So there's a church nearby to me that was built in like the 1100s or something. Gorgeous building. It's technically Anglican now, but I go there each morning to pray because in my mind, it's still a Catholic building. Those stones were put there by Catholics. It's just got Anglicans praying in it. So there's no reason why I can't go there and just say my own prayers when it's empty. The first thing I would say about that is that it's actually been... It's the same thing of like, going to the gym to exercise.
Yes.
It's so much better because you've got I'm there to do one thing and one thing only, and that's pray. And so the focus is so much better. And also being surrounded by beauty in that sense, because God is beauty, that also helps as well. So I was just making, the idea that came to mind there is, I know you've, for example, got a church in your local village.
It's funny you say that because I've been going there more frequently as well to pray there.
Cool. Yeah, all right. Well, stole the idea out of my mind then. So we see if because the other thing is that if you put yourself in that situation, you're probably more likely to speak to people, bump into people, talk to people, and you're getting in the world a bit more as well. So
yeah, it's a very small village here, so I have I think the local populace for about 50k radius has learned like not to come and truffle thieve here because there's a slightly ferocious creature in these lands. And I have obviously as you know, I'm a shy wallflower type in this sort of conversation, so I've already dropped enough little theological and mental bombs about things like, genetic modification on various topics, whether it's food, people, whatever. And so I think that the general outlook is like, just smile and move back quietly when that guy starts talking. But so I don't want to push it too much. But yeah,
but at the end of the day, they can't kick you out the church. They can't.
Oh,
kick you out, can they?
no. No, I would like to see them try, but no, that's not. I've never had a bad experience, and of course, then people that I invite to the house, I say these things to, and the overwhelming case is that, from complete strangers. I've had some people. Like, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this house. I've had leaks and stuff. I've had some people take a look and whatever, and we'll have a coffee while we're talking about things, and they bring it up sometimes. What's going on in the world, theology, God, all that. And the interesting thing is that as soon as I start to talk a little bit about sedevacantism and the church is not the church anymore, because I'll start out by them saying something. I'll say, well, I'm Catholic, and they're like, oh, well, I'm Catholic too, and I would go like, well, no, you're probably not. And they're like, what? And it's like, oh, I don't mean to offend you, but really, Catholicism, the only Catholics left are sedevacantists. And they're like, what's that? Then I start talking to them a bit, and like, honestly, at least 8, if not 9 times out of 10, like, you see their eyes like light up and sort of go like, oh, that explains a lot. Because when they say they're Catholic, they're nominal Catholics. Most of these people haven't been in a church in years. They don't attend any kind of mass, and if they do, they'll go for maybe the Christmas fake Novus Ordo mass, that sort of thing. So once you start to explain to them, and then you tell them, look, by the way, there are their churches around. And I mentioned the names of the IMBC, Istituto Mater Boni Concili, which is quite widespread in Italy. It's picking up momentum throughout Europe, really. So. And then they get interested, and they're so like, oh, well, can I read more about this? And I'm like, well, my books are in English, but, go on their website, and they've got books in Italian that they'll explain stuff to you. And also, even just some of the articles, because most people won't read a book nowadays, but one of the most brilliant articles on the Istituto Mater Boni Concili website is about that French priest that got decapitated while doing his fake mass in a French church. This was years ago. And I mean, the title of the thing sort of gives you the whole, insight that they've got into it. It's like, oh, the French priest that was murdered. Is this martyrdom or just dessert? That sort of like, well, if you're going to do a fake satanic mass for years and years, well, then perhaps, that God's got tired of you. It's like, I mean, that's the gist of it. Very polite language and, very, very...
I was going to say, I've never seen such a balance between, genteelness and hardcore brutality as I've seen in the proper Catholic Church.
Oh, mate, the short essay on the new Mass, it's brutal in English, but if you read it in Italian, if you're fluent in Italian has got different levels of language, as you well know. It's got the common one that we all speak, then it's got a bit more advanced one that some educated people speak, and then written formal Italian has now also got 2 levels. But the original formal Italian it's a beautiful language, man. It can, in a few words, give such an intense expression of what's really going on. And this essay is written all in that language, which is beyond any kind of reproach in terms of vulgarity or anything like that. But man, it's like you're just getting your samurai sworded into it's like those manga movies where it's like, and the guy just stands there for a bit before he just it's beautiful, honestly. Let me just quickly catch up with the because I wanted the chat to ask questions, and whatever questions we're going to try and answer. So Miss SOJ, I'm not sure what that stands for, but Special Operations something? I don't know, sounds cool. Anyway, my church has 1 Latin Mass. Confession is on Saturday at Novus Ordo in the afternoon. Has confession right before service become passé? Well, Miss OJ, I'm afraid that unfortunately you're attending a Novus Ordo church. So even though it's a Latin Mass, It's still a fake, corrupt mass because it is not the original mass. It excludes the prayer for the Jews to convert. It names the current fake pope as being a pope. So it's not the actual proper mass. So if you go to luxvera.org, that's Luxvera, VERA.org, you can find your nearest Sede church there. There's probably more than that, but if you attend to one of those, you can probably meet people that will tell you where the other churches are and so on. Okay, your quest is quite new. You noticed, okay. Nothing beats a lovely old church. I go to one built in 1924 and it's gorgeous. That's Stinky Peterson. Freeman on the Sand says, I used to go to Mass on Fridays as part of school. We had NIV Bibles and Mass was done in English. Despite this, I still feel it was of benefit. Well, yes, compared, you see, the Satanist infected Novus Ordo has 2,000 years of momentum to try and like move over. So it's still going to take some time before they can make women priests and all the other.
Well, like I always say, we're still, even in the West, living in the echo of Catholicism. But even if it's an echo, the echo is still beautiful.
Yeah. Someone asked me, are you sedevacantist? When I stated my criticism of the Pope, I didn't even know the term, but I do now, and I agree. Right. Good. Excellent.
I've had that with a couple of people. I've had a conversation with like 3 or 4 people now I can think of.
Yeah.
And they've told me I'm Catholic, and I'm like, really? And when we get into it, they tell me all of their own thoughts about, and they're kind of like Catholic, but they're kind of disappointed to be Catholic in that sense. Like, I know I'm Catholic, but I don't really like what's going on in the church. They give me their point of the argument, and I go, well, I'm a sedevacantist. So what is that? It means this, this, and this.
Yeah.
The church that you think is the church is not real. They kind of just go, huh, makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Didn't even know there was a word for it. Cool.
Yeah.
And it all just kind of clicks into place. So sometimes, I had this discussion about, we're talking about the so-called traditional community in the UK at the moment, because obviously we've got out-and-out sedevacantists.
Yeah.
We've got many people who are in these different groups like the SSPX and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a big discussion about how much overlap there potentially is between those two groups. Obviously, the church is the church, so it's not like they're both somewhere in the middle. It's like, one is true and the other's false. But in the respect that many people in the SSPX camp don't even really know what sedevacantism is.
No.
Right? They are actually, really, if you were to ask them or push them, they actually already are sedi. They just don't know it yet, don't have the word for it.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things is that the word sedevacantist has become a bit of a boogeyman for a lot of people.
Yes, we're going to get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, we should at some point, because I think there is a rhetorical thing going on with the use of the term, which is quite, we both know the effects of that, right? But we'll take that in its own time.
I took that up actually in my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. It's towards the end, but when I used to use almost exclusively the term sedeprivationist, and I explained what I mean by that in the book, because I was essentially trying to claim back the word sedeprivationist, because sedeprivationism was valid, acceptable up to about 1975, let's say, to be generous, because at that time it was such an upheaval when Roncalli came on and then Montini took over and produced the Vatican II. Keep in mind, the last document of Vatican II, I think, was issued in late '64. So let's call it 1965. By 1965, all the documents of Vatican II had been produced. So at that point, prudence is one of the virtues of the church. So you should be prudent. But in my mind, it goes both ways. In my mind, if something, as my priest said to me, if something is suspect, stay away from it. Rather than if something is suspect, be charitable, And you've got to have discernment of when you're going to use these things. But basically, sedeprivationist was saying, well, the Pope was validly elected by valid cardinals, so he's a valid Pope technically, but spiritually he's clearly not, because he's producing this stuff. No, that is not how it works. And I think the intent of Gerard de Larrieux, who was the bishop, well, ultimately the bishop, he was just a monk at the time, Benedictine monk. ultimately his aim was trying to say, hey, good guys that are still in the church, like, realize there's a problem here, and like, let's not make it like, hey, burn the Pope out of his chair, but let's just figure out what's really going on. That's what he was trying to do, I think, which is the charitable approach. Unfortunately, the charitable approach is the completely wrong approach when you get to the stage where we had got by 1958. And this is what always happens, you know, like 10 hardcore guys kill everybody, build a wall and say, we're not going to have any violence in the city, we'll reserve it for the people out there. And then for the next 50 years, they carry on killing people and, you know, protecting the land. And then their sons are born in the village, grow up in the village, and it's all safe and it's cool. And they've expanded the village, and now there's no more wild beasts and dangerous bandits. So it's like, oh, everybody's cool. Yeah, we're cool, we're cool. And in comes some guy, maybe with a small hat or whatever, who like enters the gate and says, oh, I just want to sell my wares. Well, sure, why not? You know, we're all friends here. And before you know it, one of the old original 10 guys who's now been dead 200 years, if he'd seen this guy stepping in through the gate, he would have lopped his head off right there. No questions, no ifs, ands, or buts. That would have just been, no, this guy's an infiltrator. We know them. We know what they're trying to do. As things get comfortable, you know, it's the old saying, you know, good times make for weak men make for bad times make for strong men. It's that cycle. So it was a valid, semi-valid theory when people didn't know what was going on, they were being confused.
And to be clear, it was a theory at the time as well, right? I mean,
exactly.
Even de Laurier, if I remember correctly, didn't insist that his seminarians believed it. He was just working this out as something of, well, if we were going to try and make sense of this in one respect, this is a possible way to do it.
And in fact, de Laurier went back on it. He went back on it, which was a condition for him to become a bishop by being ordained by Bishop Thuck. So he was ordained under the thing that, like, no, I've let go of sedeprivationism. Then he got ordained, and then a couple of years later he said, no, but I think it's still got a valid point. And, you know, he fell into error. In a way, I think the era of de Laurier is somewhat similar to Anne Barnhart. I think Anne Barnhart, you know, is now a sedevacantist because Ratzinger died, and she was saying that he was the valid pope, and he wasn't, of course. But the thing about, you know, what I want to ask Anne, and I've asked her multiple times, and she refuses to deign me with an answer, though she had responded to my original first email, but this wasn't part of it. I asked her, well, when do you stop becoming a sedevacantist and become one of us crazy sedevacantists? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 3, 5, 10? Because we've been going over 60, and you're saying we're crazy because it's over 60 years. So what if Bergoglio lasts another 35 years, 20? Or is it just whatever's convenient until Bergoglio drops dead and then you have another guy? And the other guy is going to be worse, probably. So, you know, good luck with that. So by stages, the sedevacantist position is taking place. Now, when I wrote the book, I changed the meaning of sedeprivationist because I said, well, with 60 years of hindsight, it's absolutely clear that those guys were heretics, they were not valid popes and whatever. It's clear to everybody. And it doesn't matter, you know, like I had this conversation with our priest, and he said, well, you're absolutely right in everything that you're saying in this particular section of your book. You got it 100% correct with respect to that. My contention is only that I can't know the heart of a man in his internal forum. To which I replied, how should that shouldn't make any blind bit of difference, because by all external forum indications, the guy is an absolute full-on notorious heretic and must be treated as such. And he said, yes, you're right. The only difference between you and me is I reserve judgment on the internal forum. And I said, well, you can do that, but that's not a requirement. Nobody can be forced to do that or have to. And he said, no, you're right, you know. So I absolutely do not reserve my judgment in the internal forum because I don't have one, nor do I need to have one. I don't need to judge a guy's internal forum. If externally he's behaving as a heretic, then I treat him as a heretic. Just like, you know, if somebody comes into my house with a reputation of being a murderer and a rapist, I'm not going to wait for him to murder and rape my family before I kick him out of the house. You know, it's like, no, you're not coming into my house. And if you step over that threshold, well, then all your problems will be over.
Mm.
You've had fair warning, bugger off. So it's absolutely very clear that, the sedeprivationist, as originally intended, didn't make sense. However, etymologically, sedeprivationist is the correct term, because
So, yeah, I understand that. So my contention with this whole issue, to be clear to everyone who's not familiar, like there's actually two different conversations we're going to have now on this issue, because there's the issue of sedeprivationism and sedevacantism and how that's being interpreted by different people. But there's also the actual rhetorical use of the word either sedevacantist or sedeprivationist. My issue is not so much with the accuracy of either term necessarily, dialectically, because I agree with your take on that already. The issue that I get is that in conversation, when you say to someone, I'm a sedevacantist, then there's a switch in their head where it goes, well, there's Catholicism and then there's sedevacantism. And this is where I think it gets tricky in conversation, because the moment you have to say that there's one term or two terms for that one thing,
no,
you know what I mean, right?
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The way I address that is very simple. I say I'm Catholic, and then I pause for a second, and I say, but I'm actually Catholic, not like all Bergoglio and the fake pedophiles in the Vatican. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, no, I'm actually Catholic. The technical term for actual Catholics today is sedeprivationist or sedevacantist, whichever term you prefer.
This is the tricky thing, though, right? Because that's not the technical term. In that sense, it's like the technical term for the theological position that we hold that explains the situation in the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Is sedevacantism. But obviously, by that time, everyone's brain switched off.
I think what's going on there is your autism is taking over.
No. But I'm aware of my autism in that respect, right? But what I mean is, like, the moment you have to explain like those layers of things.
I've never had a problem doing that, to be honest, because I never start off saying I'm a sedevacantist. I say I'm a proper Catholic.
Yeah.
I'm like a 1095 Catholic, and they're like, what do you mean 1095? The guys who went on the Crusades, those guys were Catholic. Today, Bergoglio and the Vatican is filled with imposters that have got nothing to do with Catholicism. They're actually, satanic guys.
The other thing,
and they're like, but then how do you know what's what? And then I say, well, have you ever heard of sedevacantism? So.
Yeah, and then you can get into the details and separate it. But the other tricky thing is when people say, like, oh, I'm a trad Catholic, for example, or traditional Catholic. I think even then that creates difficulties, right? Because in your mind you immediately bifurcate. Oh, so you've got like a Catholicism and then an older version of Catholicism, and it's like, well, no, because at the end of the day, there's just one thing, right? It's just Catholicism. That's it. Nothing else. It's not like you've got Catholicism light and diet Catholicism and extra Catholicism. It's just Catholicism.
The thing is, unfortunately, with that, I found that you've got to experiment, but my personal experience has been that rhetoric is more useful than dialectic in convincing people to take a look. Because, well, as you know, the little book, this one, that's got like, there's definitely like bunches of dozens and dozens of people that have emailed me that, I say well over 100, I don't know, maybe well over 200 by now, but there's like a bunch of people that have got baptized properly and become proper Catholics as a result of that. Right. And that short book is essentially one rhetorical punch after another, backed up by the steel of dialectic. I think of when you're doing a conversation to try and like change somebody's mind, not change mind, present facts that will change minds. Exactly. Because I don't want to manipulate people or change their mind into believing whatever I believe. That's not the point. The point is there are absolute objective facts that are reality. The sun comes up, well, doesn't, but comes up in the east and goes down in the west, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And that's a thing that's not going to change unless we get hit by a really big asteroid, in which case that'll be the least of our problems. So I always find that the best approach is like a bullet. You've got a steel core penetrator, that's the dialectic, and then you surround it by nice soft lead with a bit of a covering of copper, just to give the initial impact. Then there's the softening, and then there's the penetrating seed that they can't get rid of. And that's kind of how I do it, because, so is it, like, for example, when I argue with the Orthodox, I go, well, whatever, you guys are pretty close to us, but, you're deceivers, backstabbers, liars, and you can't rely on you guys. But what? Oh, and also you can't read, because the filioque is clearly identified in the Bible, like very clearly proceeds from both. So you're illiterate and you're untrustworthy. So you can't be the good guys.
Yeah. Same
Now,
thing with Protestantism, right? It's like, you're great people. I mean, love hanging around
Yeah.
you. You're fundamentally retarded. But
yes,
other than that, great.
illiterate as well. Oh, we got a couple more things here. There's a lot of anti-Jesus propaganda on 4chan, where I think someone mentioned your channel. Thus, I'm here. Jesus and his church have been the bastion against Satanism since its inception. This upsets certain small hat fanciers. Look, I wouldn't go to 4chan for my theology, but hey, if that's what led you here, God acts in mysterious ways. I got closer to Christianity by reading Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was an arch heretic. And what, now looking at his work, I can see how he was trying to divert the true church from the truth. But I was so far away from it that his diversion was like, hey, this actually brings me closer to, the whole concept of Jesus and the reincarnation. Yeah, that's, not reincarnation, I mean the resurrection. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. And he was an arch heretic. So if 4chan brings you here, hey, God uses broken tools, as we know.
Yeah,
Unicorn Cup just got here. How did you get the Depeche Mode singer on? Very good. You're probably too young to know who Depeche Mode was, but slightly gay. But then we've got a guy with a long number as a name. Is the problem with the new Mass that it's been translated or that it's been changed? I'm Protestant, so I know nothing of these things. Oh, well, welcome 5624 3G. The problem with the Novus Ordo Mass is that there is a one-page document, which is a papal encyclical ex cathedra, which means it is forever true, not to be changed, and it says in it it's never to be changed by anybody, called Quo Primum. And Quo Primum is Latin for in the first, if you want to translate it roughly. So as a fundamental principle, the Latin Mass shall not be changed. The Latin Mass, you need to know, has been the same since the time of Peter till now. And people say, well, there's been some things added. No. There are various versions of the Latin Mass that are like a shorter one, a longer one, whatever. But the point
is... It's like auxiliary stuff, isn't it? Like the core skeleton has always remained the same. Like
exactly.
The clothes it wears sometimes is slightly different.
Exactly that. It's like saying, shooting a rifle is different. No, shooting a rifle is shooting a rifle. Then you've got different kinds of rifles. You've got rifles with scopes. You've got iron sights. But and the Latin Mass, by the way, doesn't even have anywhere near that many variations. It just, the core is the same. Then over the millennia, from one sentence in the Bible, you can infer certain things. And doctors of the church have spent, decades doing this, and over the centuries, the church has distilled certain interpretations of things and whatever. But if you go to an actual proper Latin Mass, every movement has got a story behind it. Every movement, every kneeling, every literally everything that gets done in a proper Latin Mass has got a reflection of catechisms of the church, of teachings of the church, of specific sections of the liturgy, of the Catholic year even. So, and it's always been the same. Now, the Novus Ordo Fake Mass completely destroyed that, changed that, said it didn't have to be in Latin. Now, before the Novus Ordo thing, the Latin Mass was done in Latin, regardless of country, place, or what the local language was. You could do a Latin Mass in like Vietnam, China, Peru, Spain, Italy, England, and it was exactly the same Mass every single time. And every Catholic knew enough Latin to be able to follow the Latin Mass thoroughly. Now imagine the power of that. Imagine how powerful that is. You could go to any country in the world and go to any Mass and know that that was going to be a Catholic Latin Mass, and you would meet Catholics, devout Catholics, that would follow the same religion. you immediately
cool
had
things,
a family away from home.
yeah, one of the cool things I've experienced already is like during my recent little trips through Europe, we have the Latin Mass here in the UK, and then when I visited Italy, it was exactly the same
Yeah,
prayers. And the other cool thing there was like, if all of the, if you learn the Rosary in Latin, for example, then you can pray the Latin Rosary with a room full of people you don't even know their language. I had
yeah,
exactly the same thing when I visited Switzerland, for example.
yes.
It's awesome. Everyone's on exactly the same page. Everyone knows exactly what the rules are. You're right. Always following a set criteria for how this stuff should be done properly. So it's always the same level of validity. It's always the same level of reverence. It's always the same level of purity, basically, right?
There's many details. I mean, we could go on for hours at this, so I'm just going to put the highlights. One of the other things the Novus Ordo did is to give the host in the hand. Now, you must understand that as Catholics, we truly believe that there is transubstantiation, which means the host becomes the body of Christ, literally. And as such, it is, an extremely holy thing that this goes all the way back to Christianity before the New Testament, or as some people call it, Judaism, which has got nothing to do with modern Judaism, which is Talmudic Judaism. But the original priests in the original religion, they had to go through a whole cleansing ritual for days, if not even a month, before they could approach the tabernacle and be the guys that were going into the tabernacle. Similarly, some of that stuff has been passed down, so the priest is the only one that is allowed to touch the host and put it directly on your tongue so that you don't corrupt it with your filthy essence, essentially. That's also one of the reasons why you're not supposed to eat for they've relaxed in that somewhat. They're saying like 3 hours or whatever, but it should really be 12 hours, and if you can, 24 hours, without anything except maybe water.
You see it at the end of the offer, after the offertory has been done and the host has been given out. The priest then scrapes the plate
Yes.
to make sure that even the smallest speck of host is
Yeah.
taken up into the chalice and it's all consumed. But
Yeah.
nothing, not even a crumb is allowed to fall on the floor. Not even
No.
a drop of the wine is
Yeah.
allowed to fall, because it's all completely body, soul, and divinity of Christ.
And the thing is, you're not, you're not supposed to eat because you don't want the host, which is the body of Christ, to mix in with whatever food you got in your gut, and essentially you're mixing something holy with something profane. So that's part of it. They've taken that out. The other thing is the priest is now facing the congregation, so he's doing it to the people. The whole point of the Mass is that the offering of Christ is from God, and the priest is honoring this by communing with God. We, the people behind the priest, we're just spectators to this. It's not like, oh, here, have a meal, and some grape juice, like the Baptists.
It's a very good point to raise in terms of how people who are new to it, approach the Latin Mass and what it's for. Because, I've had Protestants and Novus Ordo Catholics alike kind of say, but, if it's in Latin, I don't really understand what's going on. You just got to say it's not the point. You're not there to understand it.
Yeah.
The priest isn't talking to you. Like, you're not the point. God is the point.
Yeah.
So he's there talking to God to ask him basically for this profound sacrifice to come down and be humble before us.
Yeah.
In the meantime, what are you doing? Are you being entertained? Who cares?
Yeah.
Just kneel, be
Yeah.
respectful, wait
Yeah.
for the presence, and in that meantime, this is the most important part. Like, that time is used for you to pray.
Yes.
What else? What better thing you got to do? So it's
I
in
mean,
the presence of God.
When I first started attending Mass, and my Latin was very rusty, and I just put it in my head. I was like, well, I don't really know what's going on. That thought lasted point something of a second, because before even I went in, I said, well, if I don't know how to do anything else, just say Ave Maria or say a Pater Noster. Just, I'm here to be respectful and in prayer, whether that's vocalized in my head or whether that's just
Intention.
an intention. So that's it. And of course, then they change the words and they change all sorts of things, and now they
Now
include.
they've added guitars and clowns and
Yeah, it's become Protestant, essentially. It's become like Jesus is my boyfriend, guitar thing, which it's just David did a little bit of that in an interview I did with him on the last video. He was like, "Oh, let me just show."
Great interview. I really like David vibe.
He is awesome. He's a
Yeah.
brilliant guy.
He's the only guy who can simultaneously be like an Eastern Orthodox priest, an Amish father, and like a Catholic all at the same time.
Yeah, it's it's his story I found fascinating because he's about as hardcore as a Protestant as you could possibly become. You know, your father was killed and he was a missionary. Then your stepfather is also like one of their priests or whatever. It's like, and you're raised that way, and you raise your kids that way, and you've got like 10 plus half kid on the way, and then you like realize the truth, and that is such a powerful event, testimony, call it what you like, but it's clear that something true happened there.
Yeah, very cool.
Stinky Peterson says, how many valid bishops are left? I'm aware of at least 3 or 4 but I'm not particularly up to speed on that. This bishop, I never know how to pronounce his name. Is he Belgian or is he Dutch? I'm not sure.
Is it Steiner?
Yeah, I never know how to pronounce his name.
I think it's Steiner, Bishop Steiner. It's in Belgium. He's based in Belgium.
Yes, he's based in Belgium, but he travels a lot. And then there's, is it Pivaranus?
Pivaronus, yeah. So you got Pivaronus for the CMRI.
Yeah, and then there's Sanborn, who is, however, in some error at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I think there's others, but I'm not. I think there's.
I've got a vague suspicion or a vague idea that there's one in Africa or like in Asia or something.
And I think there's one in Mexico as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's more that we're just not necessarily aware of.
Not many is the short answer.
Yeah.
And there's no two ways about it. Like the situation the church is in at the moment is a very bad situation.
It is dire, yeah.
Yeah.
But the lay people, the number of lay people is growing, and the number of priests is growing because they're having seminaries. There's quite a few of them got ordained not too long ago.
Well, to give you an idea, I've been helping to try and not organise but coordinate all of the possible SEDI masses here in the UK.
Yeah.
And God has been very generous in the sense that the start of this year there was actually only one mass in the whole country, right? The whole of the UK. As of this month, we've got, we had I think like 10 separate masses, but by 4 different organisations. So it's like a 10-fold increase in masses within 1 year. So, and we're seeing larger congregations, more priests involved, more people are interested. It is definitely growing.
And the beautiful thing I find is that young people are getting involved. I mean, you go to
plenty of young people. Yeah.
Any of the Catholic masses I've been to, it's filled with children. Now, to my eternal shame, my feral children they are not church trained. I see these little kids, 2, 3, 4 years old, with like their veils, and they're so pretty, and they stay there and they say their prayers. My kids are like, I managed to make my son sit through a whole mass quietly, and I was when I came.
Quite good that time.
He was, and
I
I think we gave him ice cream afterwards because he was just awesome. And he wasn't really thinking about the ice cream because that's not how his brain works. He was just trying to be good for dad, sort of thing. So
he was quite good during that one as well, if I remember.
Yeah, no, he was. He really was.
No, your daughter as well was quite good during.
Yeah, look, the thing is, I actually had this conversation with David a little bit towards the end, and I had a long conversation with Adam yesterday where we touched on this. So I think I'm going to do probably an interview with Adam where he takes the Kurgan to task on various Catholic things I'm not doing.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
We had a good long chat, and I think it's important because I am, it's like, for me, I know this doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but for me, the church, my progress in the church is a very parallel, analogous thing to my progress in martial arts. Except that with the church I can carry on, when I'm a very old man. I mean, I can in martial arts too. It just becomes easier actually as I get older than martial arts, because then I just have to do that and that and that, and possibly as my eyesight goes, just that. But so the point is, there's like moments of really intense training and like super increase, then there's like plateaus, then there's intense training where nothing seems to budge at all, and then there's like yeah, you kind of relax a bit, and then it's like you suddenly learn something, and then you step up again. So
Yeah, so I understand what you mean. I think where I'll speak to this, and I don't want to say it's like better or worse approach
mm,
because it's not really how I'm approached, but just the thoughts that come to mind is that in my own relationship with the life of prayer, I think is what you would call it. But that
yeah,
what is that at the end of the day? That just means coming into contact with God, right?
yes,
I mean, one of my recent realizations, I know what you mean by the ebbs and flows, and sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. You kind of get little bursts of realizations, and then maybe
yeah,
he just lets you or allows you to kind of persist for a while. But one of the recent revelations was this idea that it's thinking of firstly the whole life of prayer should be 100% constant, right? It's not like you go to the dojo, you do Christianity and then you leave. It's like,
yeah,
no, Christianity should be something that is watered into every single little thing
yes,
you do
yes. So is
all
martial
throughout
arts,
the
by
day,
the way.
all throughout your soul. Yeah, I know. But yeah, it's supposed to be that thing that you completely imbibe into every single thing that you do. But
Yeah.
here's the other thing that kind of is starting to click for me. I don't want to talk about like get ahead
Hmm.
of myself, but just in this sense that I think I was personally approaching prayer as almost like a box to be ticked, whereas it's as you would know, yeah, because I do have a certain quirk of mind, as we've spoken about in the past. But
Autism.
getting in that attitude where it's not about ticking boxes, but it's about forming. It is about forming a relationship,
Yeah.
and behind that it's about developing an attitude in some
Yeah.
sense more than anything else. And it's your
Absolutely, yes.
attitude of what is your attitude towards God in this life. And in that sense, if you take your attitude towards God, therefore what is your attitude towards your life, your decisions, everything you do, your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts? What is that all for at the end of the day? And
Very
unless
good.
that's for one particular thing or for one particular person, well, three people actually, because we're not heretics. Um, but that's what it's all. That's what it's all about. I mean, one of the bits of theology I came across recently that kind of helped with that is just that re-emphasizing the fact that, and I don't mean this in a Calvinist way, like God doesn't need us for anything.
No.
Like He wants us to do stuff. He wants us to be
Yeah.
active. We're not passive in that sense. But at the end of the day, when we get to heaven, He's not going to like file us in to be clerks or something for
Yeah.
like some kind of bureaucracy. It's like no, the only thing He needs of you is your love, your attention, and your soul. That's it.
Yes.
Anything else in terms of doing tasks or fulfilling quotas or something, it's completely the wrong way to think about it.
This is excellent point because it's something that I blogged about to again try and get Anne Barnhart to wake up, which was like she had written in a blog post that it's like, oh, just because the Pope is a complete heretic and is fake and whatever, and he's bad and he's not the real Pope, doesn't mean I'm not going to go to Novus Ordo Mass, even though the priest is horrible and they do it badly and whatever, because I'm not going to leave Jesus alone on the cross. And I was like, really? Are you so egocentric to think that Jesus needs you? We need him.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the whole point of
Exactly.
why I did that. We
He
need
was
him.
fine in eternity without us. Yeah.
It's not like, it's not going to make being crucified any less drastic by you being there.
Yeah.
He did that for you because you weren't there to begin with. So it's like, and that's
Another
absolutely,
tangential.
yeah.
No, go on.
No, sorry, and I wanted to say, like, the point you made is actually, it's actually pivotal. You've actually reminded me of something that I need to be doing, which is the constancy of it. It should be something that you're doing all the time. And when I said, oh, martial arts too, kind of a half joke, but it's not, because for me, whether it was karate or sistema, that did become my daily thing. I was doing that going to work. I was breathing a certain way walking. I was doing, and even now, when I'm walking around, or I get upset with my daughter sometimes because she's like hating the clouds all the time, and I'm like, pay attention. One day I'll be dead, and I won't be there to tell you, look both ways before you cross the road, or watch out for that guy that's coming, because you can see it's like, be aware of what's going on. And I know I did it with you and the other guy that I don't see.
But I suppose the difference I would speak to there is that you don't form a relationship with karate.
No, but the point. No, the point is just that that's just where my brain goes. If something were to suddenly break in, I don't have to think about, oh, the glass is a weapon. It's in my body. It's just the glass will be a weapon or whatever's lying around. And
So you
that's what
want
I
to
need to
you want
do.
to habituate your attitude of God.
Yeah, I need to do that with prayer, basically.
Yeah. Here's the other thing that came to mind as well. Like one of the mistakes that I think I make with prayer is priding myself too much in the idea that I'm the one doing it. In the sense that no, it's primarily God. Like we can put effort in, but really, even in all that, like our own will, even at its most uh, even at its most intense, is such a small pinprick of relevance compared to all that He's doing to us with the grace that He's pouring in.
The sensation I get when I'm praying properly, which I need to do a lot more of, the best way to describe it, which is why I think the church does it, is the sensation that you can imagine a little child having towards his dad. And I see that because of all my kids. And it's like, like I said, my kids are unfortunately somewhat feral. So they know they're doing dodgy shit they shouldn't be doing. They know they're doing not the right thing. But the thing is, when they do the right thing, or when it's like, he was just saying to me today, like, Dad, I learned, like, I did that today. I wrote my name today all by myself. And it's like, look.
Cool.
And it's like, he's done something that he's proud of because he knows I'll be happy that he's done it. That he's learned to do that.
Yeah.
And the feeling is like, if you imagine being that little kid, or if you can remember being a little kid towards your dad and when you got something right. I mean, I still remember, which probably goes to show that, maybe positive reinforcement wasn't that strong in my house, because I remember I was 2 years old, possibly even younger than 2 years old, because I was a year and 9 months old when my brother was born, but then he was hanging around with my mom a lot. So I was definitely not 3. I was either 2, 2.5, something like that. And I used to go hunting with my dad, which when we came home, we cleaned the shotgun. And I was like always like my own son now. I was like, oh, can I help, Dad? Can I do something? And I was a quiet kid, Don, like my son, who's taken some of his DNA from his mom. But anyway, so I like, okay, and he gave me I don't know if you know, when you take a shotgun apart, the bit that's got the trigger on it is like its own little, it's got all the little mechanisms in there, and it's quite involved. And he goes, oh, you've got small fingers, you can try and clean that with a toothbrush and a bit of cloth and whatever. And I stayed there religiously, trying to clean every piece of it. And by the time I finished and I handed it back to him, he looked at it and goes, damn, son, you did a really good job. You've done it better than I've ever done. And I was like, oh. And I remember like, wow, that's about probably the only compliment I remember from my dad. Like, until I was in my 30s, he threw out one or two here and there, like half sarcastically. So, that the point is that feeling of like when I'm praying properly, I'm like, I remember all the crappy things I'm doing, all the stuff I'm not doing, all the stuff I'm supposed to do that I'm not doing, and he still loves me. And I'm like, ooh, I feel like crap, Dad. It's like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm bad of all this, but I do love you. And I occasionally, while I'm playing in mud and like getting my shoes dirty and rolling around in dirt and doing all the wrong things and breaking the window, I do care about you. It's like the same little kid that's like, Daddy, I kind of crashed the car and threw a stone through the window and like I set half the house on fire, but I really love you. And
then you get a breeze of an impression where it's like, son, I know that you're making all these mistakes, but I'm still just happy that you're here talking to me.
Yeah, exactly that.
That's a really good bit.
Yeah.
I know you're flawed, but I want that. From God's point of view, it's like, I want you to be happy. It's why I made you.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, right?
Which brings me into like, I'm sort of trying to develop, not really, I don't care, but developing my defense for my interview with Adam when he's going to have a go at me for all the wrong things I'm doing. And one of the concepts that I believe is correct, which doesn't excuse anything, let me make that very clear, doesn't excuse anything at all, but I do think there's all sorts of different souls and that God loves us all, like the quasi-monk like yourself, or possibly Adam now, that does everything right, does his prayers, behaves properly, doesn't do any dodgy stuff. is loved by God for sure. And the guy like me, who I think, and again, I'm not taking credit for anything at all. You know, everything happens through and because of and thanks to and the mercy of God. But a lot of people have sort of gone on the, I think, better or more correct path as a result of the work that I've done, or books that I've written, or videos that I've done. And I think in the people that I know, I've probably helped bring more people to the true church than almost anyone I know, to be honest, including priests. So there's got to be a value to that. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was different from how I am. So the way I see it, you know, when I was talking to Adam, and I was like, look, I've almost all the other graces or things that I should have, I probably don't have enough of, and are doing wrong. And the one thing that I think I'm doing kind of okay, you know, that I'm okay at, and again, not saying that I'm there or there's no room for improvement, or that I'm at anything above like 1,000th of where I should be, but I have achieved a level of intrinsic faith, I call it, that I would have never in my wildest dreams imagined was even ever possible for me to have. So it's like, you know, and I said to Adam yesterday, it's like, look, God forbid anything terrible happens to one of my kids or dies or anything like that. You know, that's fucking nightmare stuff, right? But even if something like that should happen, I don't think I'd lose my faith. I would be like, there is a reason for everything, even if I can't get it right now and it's doing my head in, and I just want to commit harakiri from pain. And the thing is that whenever I have put my trust in that absolute faith, even when everything was going wrong, it's always paid off. It's always, always, always the situation or whatever is just turned around in some unexpected, magical, miraculous way that I'm like, and I wish I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't even. I was maybe surprised in the way that it happened or some aspect of it, but I'm actually have enough faith that I'm like, I'm not even surprised at the event itself. I'm surprised maybe at how it happens or the series of coincidences that happen to make it happen. But it's like, so that's I think I'm like, you know, I make a joke about it, but I think it's fair to say that as types of souls, I'm basically a guy who's been a mercenary all his life, and then he's like found God, and it's like, all right, we're going to paint a cross on your arm, and you go out and do the same thing you were basically doing before. Kind of like Paul. Paul was a complete zealot. I mean, he was killing Christians and whatever, and then afterwards, he'd have himself killed rather than deny Christ. So he didn't change. He was a full-on zealot. He just changed target. You know, his goal was different. His approach was different, but he was still a very, and I think, you know, like if you take David, I mean, David, he wasn't that cool a guy. I mean, David wasn't that nice a man.
Oh, from the Old Testament, yeah.
Yeah, and yet he was most favored by God. And I kind of understand that, because again, I go back to the child, right? I hope one of my children turns out to be a quiet, law-abiding, obedient, to their father and mother at least, child, you know, that does everything right. And I'm probably my oldest sisters, my oldest daughter is probably their eldest sister is probably closest to that. And of course, I love them dearly all. But, you know, my son, or probably one of my daughters, there's probably going to be even worse, when they're absolute barbarians, you know, like my kid is not, he's not a bad kid, he's good, his intentions are good, but he is, you know, if reincarnation is a thing, he's definitely Viking stock. That guy is just, rah, destroy, kind of like, you know, and not with a bad feeling, not with a bad intention, and he looks after his little sister and whatever, you know, so he's obviously got good parts. But the thing is, he's got kind of a rebel streak in him, which I know I have, and, you know, my wife is potentially probably worse than I am in that respect. But, you know, the thing is, it's not that I love him any less, and I wouldn't want him to be any different. You know, it's not like I'd say, well, we're gonna like beat you until you shape into like this like robot that follows. No, his heart is big. It's like full of passion, and he gets dragged by it. And my job is to teach him not to get dragged by it, but not to be less passionate, or not to be, to control his passion, to use his mind and reason to direct his passions.
Yeah, so the way I kind of think of that analogously is like, we can talk about all different ways in which God has allowed for the genuine good sense of diversity between human beings.
Yeah.
Saint Francis often uses this analogy of the garden, where a garden is full of all kinds of different flowers. I always quite like the idea of a symphony or a harmony or an orchestra.
Yeah.
And it's like you've got all types of different instruments in the orchestra. You've got violins, and you've got pianos, and you've got keys, and you've got trumpets. And the feeling and the weight of the sound of a trumpet is obviously quite different from that of a violin.
Yeah.
But when it comes to someone like your son with like all this energy, it's like it's not that you want the notes to be diminished, right? You want the notes to be as loud as they're going to be, or as triumphant as they're going to be, but they need to just be in tune.
Yes.
That's the point, right? And you want to listen to the conductor and see what he's saying and say, well, how is this going to harmonize everything else? We don't need you to take away your notes, and we don't need you as a trumpet to now be a piano. That's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? But we do need you to be in tune with the symphony. And I think
That's
a large part of what we're doing in life is we're all just trying to tune ourselves.
That is a very, very good analogy. Very good.
Tuning ourselves to the will of God, right? And when we're on that, that's what the Divine Symphony sounds like.
That is an absolutely brilliant, that's a very, very good analogy. We've got another quick question from Slanty Chauffeur. Is the Mass has changed? Has the Rosary also been corrupted? Yes. There's only 3 mysteries of the Rosary.
Yeah, that's quite a simple one. Basically, they've added the so-called luminous mysteries. If you ignore them, it's otherwise fine.
Yeah, everything else is fine. Just ignore the luminous mysteries. Fremen says, good point. When I was young, I went to Mass with my grandmother, and it was in French. And I, at the time, thought that Dieu was French God and not English God. Yeah. Thus, in my flawed child logic, I apologized in my silent prayer that I'm doing this in English. I don't know enough French to pray to you in that. How better it have been just in Latin. Again, it's a pretty logical thought. It's an erroneous thought, but you could see how a kid could think that. Is Richard Williamson a valid bishop? I don't know. Apologies if you already spoke on this. I was out for a second. I don't know who Richard Williamson is.
I think he is. He's quite a well-known character in the circles that I move in, but I don't know enough details about the guy.
Yeah.
I think he's currently part of Resistance. Have you know anything about that kind of group?
No.
I think he was basically he was in SSPX, but he got kicked out for being too extreme.
So like what happened to all the sedevacantist people that decided to actually use logic and reason?
And he's a very, very, very switched on bishop. Like, I think there's a lot of check marks, and he's just wrong on that last bit.
Well, the funny thing is, David was telling me in private about his priest, which I'm not going to expand on, but apparently his church is Novus Ordo. However, from what he's told me of how the priest has behaved, especially during the pandemic and whatever, it seems like he's doing everything like what a Sede guy does, except saying, I'm Sede. Apparently he doesn't use the name of the Pope in the prayers, so sounds to me like, and I wouldn't be surprised if this happens in some churches. And plus he's an old guy, so he was probably validly ordained. And as such, he's probably just, if you take Vigano, right? Everybody's going on about Vigano, what a great guy he is. As my feeling on him, which is what I wrote in the book as well, which is, look, the guy's kept quiet for 60 years, and now he's speaking out, and he still hasn't renounced it, unless he's done it recently, all the fake popes. So, if you're going to be a cowardly guy, cowering in like enemy trenches and sort of like, but I'm not throwing any grenades and I'm just quietly doing my work. Okay, I guess I can't judge you internally as internal forum, but externally, you have not said the truth. You've hidden the truth from people. You've not behaved as a proper Catholic should. Can God use such people to make the church glorious again? Undoubtedly. So that's kind of where I leave it. Stinky Peterson says, God bless Miss Barnhart. She's mistaken about some pretty major points, but her heart is in the right place. She's a firecracker. A lot of Arne Barnhart articles on certain things are very good. but you need to be careful because she is leading. She's got a very big readership, and she's leading a lot of people astray. I've actually sent an email today to a guy who I used to have vicious arguments with when the Dread Ilk Facebook page still existed, and then privately some emails, and then he wrote posts which I, slashed and took to pieces. And then more recently, after Ratzinger died, he wrote to me and he was like, "Oh, well, you were right about this and that." And I was like, I still don't get people like you. Like, you now understand that I was right up, past Ratzinger, but like, there's no difference in the arguments before it. It's literally the same points. So I've invited him to do an interview as well to see like where he's at now and what his take on it is and whatever, because it's interesting. He is definitely a guy. He'd written a blog post about how, well, if Bergoglio extends his hand, I'll have to kiss his ring, and I made all sorts of innuendo and unkind jokes about that in my blog post. But then he's gone to like, no, well, okay, Bergoglio definitely wasn't the Pope, so it's got to be Ratzinger. And I'm like, okay, dude, you're about still 6 of them away or whatever it is, if you count them. So it's very interesting what's happening. There is definitely some kind of shift.
Going back to that kind of discussion I kind of alluded to at the start, I know we've already kind of discussed this, but that's why I never talk about any of them in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is it Benedict or is it Bergoglio or is it doesn't matter. Like the doctrines don't work. If the doctrines don't work, it's not the Catholic Church, and if it's not the Catholic Church, none of these men can be the head of that church, whatever they are, whatever they could be. Apparent saints because they live completely virtuous lives, or they could be the most horrific demon-riddled people. It doesn't matter. They're just not teaching. They're obviously not leading the Catholic Church because their doctrines are not Catholic. It's as simple as that.
Exactly that. Yeah, I think it's a good approach, and whatever you can do.
The other way of doing, like when we're talking about the individuals themselves or what they've said, what they haven't said, is there's value in it, but you can also risk getting stuck in the weeds quite a lot.
Yeah.
And you get stuck in all of their individual quotes and the context, and where did he say it, why, at what point in his career, blah blah blah. How can we interpret it? So again, it seems secondary to me.
It's kind of what the Dimon brothers do, isn't it?
Yeah, which is fine because they do so much of it that they kind of covered every single possible corner that you can.
Yeah.
So
they are of course wrong about baptism of desire and of blood, but and that's what makes them go onto a heretic path. But they're otherwise.
That was the first debate I had in my most recent video. It was the baptism of desire thing.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen.
Yeah, I mean the first comment I got was someone said, "Good video, but isn't it ironic coming from someone who supports baptism of desire?" And I just said, well, it is if you just don't know anything about baptism of desire.
It's in the Code of Canon Law, which
the Code of Canon Law.
The Dimon guy, is it Peter Dimon? I think he tries on his site. He tries to like argue against that, and I'm like, dude, you're so good on everything else. Why are you doing this Protestant reverse my brain kind of
thinking thing we see sometimes, isn't it? When someone gets themselves dug into a hole, they can't dig themselves back out.
Yeah.
Intellectually. But not even. I mean, what I've loved is that a couple of people have compiled lists, and I always just link to. I don't even bother really arguing anymore. I just link the list, and the list has got like it's not just the Trent. It's not just the Catechism.
No,
it's not just
popes and various.
It's like 5 different popes and like 20 saints.
Yeah.
Right? And then like 5 other places, and it's zoom out again for a second, right? The church has taught it. If it's wrong, then the church is really, really bad at teaching stuff, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's just
and actually, can you ping me that list? That's a useful list to have.
Yeah, unfortunately, the old link has gone. So what I'll do is I'll slap that over to you on Telegram.
Archive stuff. Whenever I find something that's useful, I archive it, and then I send the archive link. So. But yeah, if you do find it, you can ping it in the chat as well or whatever. But otherwise, ping it to me later, and I'll put it on the blog.
I'll send it to you now.
Yeah. So the thing is. That's the other thing I found about the Dimon brothers. When they try to argue that, they'll take one sentence that, if you look at it just squint-eyed upside down, you could maybe possibly interpret to say what they're saying with respect to not being baptism of desire. And it's like, it's not saying that, dude. Read the whole, the context. It's quite clear.
And
Yeah,
it's the false straw man they go into again, where they'll say like, well, because you agree with baptism of desire, you agree that non-Catholics can be saved. It's like that's not what
no,
it is though.
no, it isn't.
It's exactly the same logical error that they make when they say, well, if you reject Bergoglio, then you're rejecting the Pope, and it's but the whole point is that he's not the Pope.
Exactly. Yeah,
But you're begging the question, right? You've
yeah.
already flipped the argument on its head, you
No,
know. So when you
it's
say
absolutely
baptism of
it,
desire,
it's
yeah,
very clear. You know, it's like my priest said it. The best way he said it. It's like, look, it's absolutely true. There's no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. Point. Now, what does it actually mean to be in the Catholic Church? Is there only one way to be in the Catholic Church? No, there are actually several ways to be in the Catholic Church.
and the
And
other thing that bugs me is that it's such a because I had one guy who commented who basically said, "Look, has anyone written a book on this that you can use to show?" There's like, what, a book on baptism? No, because no one cares, right? It's such a small issue that they've put in one part of canon law because it
yeah,
applies in very very specific extreme circumstances.
yeah,
And you want someone to go into a full book to go into every argument and counter argument.
it's a
It's just
paragraph. I mean, it's literally,
yeah, at most.
yeah.
But
I mean,
anyway,
literally, the only time I think baptism of desire applies, and then there's, you know, something I'm not 100% necessarily good on is invincible ignorance. So, for example, I went through a long period of at least a couple of years where I wasn't going to get baptized because I couldn't get to my daughter and I couldn't have her baptized. And I thought, well, you know, in my originally my basic understanding was like, well, if you're not baptized, you're going to hell. And it's like, well, if that means my daughter's going to hell, well, I'd rather be in hell with her than in heaven by myself. And it's a very stupid, childish, black and white thought, of course. As I evolved and I became aware of, you know, it doesn't work that way, I still couldn't, like, as an intrinsic sense of loyalty, like, well, if she's not baptized, I'm not going to do it. And then eventually I relented because I understood the topic, you know. So in that period where I was not understanding baptism correctly, not understanding salvation anywhere near correctly, so when I was in that particular moment, I was ignorant, and I was invincibly ignorant for that moment because despite my continuous study, I hadn't yet seen the light, put it that way. So if in that moment I had died, would have I gone to a lot of purgatory or would I have gone straight to hell? My feeling is that I probably would have gone to purgatory because my intent was good, was to be Catholic. I prayed daily, literally multiple times a day, mostly for my daughter, but, you know, for myself, in that make me whatever I need to be good for you and for my child, you know. So that's sort of like the most sort of extended version.
even then, but even with that kind of stuff, you know, you'll know what I mean by this. When it comes to that part, I just go, God will decide that. Because the moment you get into any of the ideas of like, well, if I think of it this way and if I could
Oh, of
interpret
course.
it that way, then it's just
Yeah.
that
Oh, no. I'm not excusing
we follow
it.
the law. Yeah, we
Yeah.
follow the laws as the laws, right? Is it
Absolutely.
possible that if
Absolutely.
God could see it a different way? Yeah,
you know,
sure.
that wasn't a consideration when I was doing that. I wasn't like saying, hey, yeah, but I'm still like baptism of desire. I
Yeah, you
wasn't
weren't trying
aware.
to lawyer your way out of it.
No. I did have a small moment of that when I was like just starting into this stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is probably the truth. Maybe I'll just carry on living my life until I'm 98, and then when I'm on my deathbed, like finally going my way out, I'm like, all right, I'm ready now. And there was like people in the Crusades and that did that. You know, there was quite a lot of guys that.
I know, but just the idea of, you know, you stand before the throne and you go, by the way, God, I found a loophole in these laws
Yeah.
that you wrote, and he kind of just goes,
The thing
stand
is,
over
yeah, the thing is that I don't know, you know, even that's an internal forum thing, because what if the guy at 98 years old goes, not only do I repent of all the evil shit that I've done, but I now realize that my waiting until I'm 98, that was the biggest sin of all because it like perpetrated all the other ones and like, I'm just a scum. But if he's genuine at that point in time, is he going to go to hell? You know, who knows? And that's my point. It's like there are some latitudes there that you can't, as a human being, you can't say that's a definite black and white yes or no.
And again, like, just shifting it back to this conversation we had about prayer, like this whole attitude towards prayer as being an attitude primarily, right? Like, because if
Yeah.
you're going to try and take it if you're trying to treat prayer like engineering, then again you're going about the completely wrong attitude. It's like the dimension and the makeup of love with a
Yeah.
capital L, right?
Yeah.
Is so much different from you trying to just again tick boxes, play the video game, score the points, all that kind of stuff. It's just the metrics are in a
Yes.
completely different dimension, right?
I would say the metrics are even externally. You might appear to be losing the game. In reality,
Oh yeah,
you're Stinky Peterson says thoughts on Malachi Martin. I'll give you mine very briefly, and then I'll ask Tony. I think Malachi Martin wrote some very useful books. He knew what was going on in the church. He certainly was aware that Wojtyla, or however you pronounce his name, the fake John Paul II, was a heretic. He got fake papal dispensation from being acting as a priest anymore. So he started wearing layman's clothes and that, which I find a bit weird, because it's like, well, if you don't think the guy is the Pope, or is a heretic, why are you bothering to ask him to like stop being a priest, But I can see some validity in it, in that he's saying, well, I stopped being a priest of your filthy fake religion. But then he didn't become a sedevacanist, so I don't know. But he's definitely Windswept House is quite a hard read, but it's fiction. But he's got a lot of non-fiction in there. And what's the one about the exorcism? That one is a scary book.
Hostage to the Devil. Hostage to the Devil.
Yeah, that's it. Hostage to the Devil. That's a book I don't recommend people read, because it actually, I think, opens you up to potentially some very, very nefarious stuff. Because
I listened to that on audiobook whilst at nighttime, whilst I was living in a castle.
And how was it?
Yeah, pretty creepy, mate.
Yeah, it's
pretty creepy. It wasn't the easiest sleeps I'd ever had in the world, to tell you that much.
Yeah, no, I was like, there was time in that book where I was like, okay, that's enough, because now I'm just going to do some prayers and make sure that I've got my armor on.
Yeah. That's a little bit too much of reality for one night.
Yeah, exactly that.
I don't know anything about the guy except for that book. I mean, I read it. It is what it is. So I understand your advice, but once you've read it, you can't unread it.
No. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, my general heuristic with anyone who's not explicitly sedevacantist is like, well, again, I'll leave that to God. But if you're not, if you're not waving the flag, then I don't think you're part of the team. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. Exactly that.
But at the same time, I was thinking about this today. I've been enjoying. I know you don't like him too much, but I quite like C.S. Lewis. I quite like him.
Oh, you're British. You would.
I know.
Toast, man.
He's nice and genteel and slow, and he takes his time with everything. No, saying that, I mean,
it gets to the point.
I'm reading one of his books at the moment called
Which one?
Great Divorce.
Yeah, The Great Divorce is excellent. I've got to say.
It's really good, mate.
That's probably my favorite C.S. Lewis book. The Great Divorce is awesome. I'll give him that.
If you want to peek into like the psychology of a hellish mindset, even at the most kind of like, the brilliant thing he does in that book is he shows so many characters who, to the surface mode of life, it's like, why would someone go to hell if they've been a good person for the whole of their life? And he really gets into their psychology. It's like, well, no, because someone keeps treating themselves as like a pathological victim. They can do that all the way through hell, right? And try to take all the people from heaven, go, come down to hell with me so that I can suffer with you.
The one that struck me the most is the one with the little lizard, I think he calls it.
Oh yeah, where the lizard is like chatting in his ear, like.
And it's just the tiniest little bit, but it's keeping the guy.
No. There's two different ones. So there's one where he's talking to a lizard on his shoulder, and his lizard is basically his sense of lust. Like, I'll give you good imagination. I'll make you think good things, and won't make you hate yourself anymore. The other one is this little dwarf and this character called the Tragedian, and this guy is just holding on to this sense of self-pity as much as he can. And there's this woman, right, who's a heavenly being now, and she's like, I love everything. I'm not happy. Like, I'm not unhappy. I'm just full of joy. I'm full of love. Come and join us. And he's like, you don't think it's bad that I'm in pain anymore?
Yeah.
And he just can't help but be miserable, right? Because he just wants it, because he just can't get over the fact that she doesn't need him anymore. Right? And he cannot get over the fact that she's just happy because she's happy. And just because he keeps holding on to that really like watered down, murky sense of self-pride, self-victimhood, self-pity, then it's like, look, we try. Even then, it's like the heavenly people are saying, we tried, but you just wouldn't accept it. Like,
Yeah.
there's people who literally won't accept joy if it's given to them on a plate,
Yes. Yes.
just so that they can hate something. You know,
Or
absolutely
or
brilliant.
like people that are like, I'm unhappy, and I'm like, get happy. You know, it's like, fuck. You know.
I don't want to be. I'm miserable. Can you be miserable with me, please? I'm
Yeah, it's like, well, if you're unhappy, why are you telling me? You've got to work on yourself there. You know, it's like, yeah.
One of the brilliant ones in there is the conversation between the mother and with the mother who's like, oh, show me my son. My son belongs to me. You know?
Yeah.
That's a really good one. And the guy's got to explain to her, like, look, your son doesn't belong to you. He
Yeah.
was a gift, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, the narrator at that point asks his guide and says, but isn't that unfair? Like, isn't she therefore being like punished for being too loving? And the guide says, no. That's not an
No.
excess of love. That's a defect of love.
Yeah.
Where you believe the people you love somehow belong to you, or you have a right to them more than God does. You know. But I mean, already talking about it, you could probably if anyone gets a copy, you can probably finish it within about 2 hours or something. It's very short,
Yeah, it's a very short book, but
highly recommended.
it's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Stinky Peterson asked, which sedevacantist authors do you recommend? Duh! Right here. And Tony. So just go on Amazon, type in Gifilotto or type in Tony Lowe. All his stuff will come on.
I've released 3 books this year, actually.
Yes. And Tony's books are all, you know, quite easy.
They're tiny, yeah. I'm a millennial, so I've got the attention span of a goldfish on on MDMA. So
You'll probably move on to comics soon, just pictures.
It takes too long to draw, mate. At least when I just put words on paper, I can just not worry about it. Though I'm actually, to be fair, I'm gonna convert all 3 of them into audiobooks by the end of the year, I think.
Well, I've been trying to convert this one into an audiobook, and it's been hell. I mean, I found a guy that, you know, went backwards and forwards, and then eventually agreed to do it, and then it was like, oh, but I've got other like guys I work for that probably would disagree with you, so I can't do it. And I said, well, can you do it under another name, or, you know, can you register a different like thing, you know, register a different? And he did, yeah, I did. So he did that, and then went backwards and forwards, and then he does like, oh yeah, I've done the first chapter. And I'm like, okay, dude, you know, it's taking a bit of time. Can you like hurry up? And he's like, gets halfway through, and he goes, oh no, I can't do it because I just disagree with the things you're saying, and it's, you know, like, I can't be a hardcore Catholic, so I can't do this. And I'm like, well, how about skimming through the book 2 months ago when I told you to do that, and I sent it to you?
Yeah.
Then I got this other guy who now I'm in the fault because he did everything. He pronounced, you know, he did some errors, which I went back to him and I said, look, okay, can you just fix this? And he's fixed them, and I've just been slammed. I actually felt terrible today. Today's the first day I've got a bit of a breather, and I thought, like, I need to like get on this and sort it out and pay the man, because he's done most of it. There's like a couple of chapters left, but so yeah, it's just been, I don't know. Do you do your own audiobooks?
Yeah, I'm gonna do my own audiobooks.
That's why. Do it yourself.
So, there you go. Yeah.
Aside from yourself, there is a guy that I actually bought his books, and see if I've got them on Kindle too. To remind myself, I found his books to be...
I think I know the one you're talking about. Is it really long?
Yes.
Yeah, I know the one. It's got the cover is like the Pope's hat, isn't it?
Yeah, it's called is it a guy called Ruby something, I think. Let me just get it.
Griff Ruby, I think, for name.
Yes, something like that. And I'll find it in a minute here. But
I think the title is like Sedevacantist, and it's really, I mean, fair play to the guy for. I think he's extremely sincere and he's trying to be very careful. But
yeah, but man, it's just. I think it's almost unreadable. It's so.
The other problem with it is that it's for people who are already basically in sedevacantism, in the sense that they already agree, but he's just trying to be thorough about some of the details with the argument.
I think he's lost in the leaves for the trees and the forest.
Yeah, he's stuck in minutia.
Oh, he's going on and on and on about something that literally takes one sentence to clarify. And I mean, I'm pretty verbose, but compared to this guy,
yeah. But
I'm writing
Griff Ruby, if
postcards.
I remember, is definitely the name.
Yeah, it's like
I'm trying to think
my phone is so slow; it's taking ages
because
to like.
most, if I remember correctly, like most SETI publications are people who have say written loads of priests and stuff have written all kinds of articles. Um,
Well,
because I
one
suppose
of the best guys online, which is all free, is he's passed now, but Cicada. And is it
Jakarta's correct. Yeah. Ah,
Chic-
well, because he's actually written full books as well, right? So I suppose that would be another
Yeah. Is it Anthony
main guy.
Cicada? I forget his.
Father Anthony Jakarta. Yeah, so Stinky
Yeah.
Peterson. Father Anthony Jakarta is your guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant stuff he's written. I can't find it. I may have deleted it because I really gave it a good effort because when I was younger, I used to never ever not finish a book. If I started it, I'd finish it, even if it was terrible. As I got older, I realized I don't need to do that anymore because
I skip through books all the time. Yeah, I engage with like a couple of chapters.
you skip through entire books and then pretend to have read them. I know because you've asked me a bunch of questions that I was like, did you not read that chapter in the book that I gave you?
No. Look, I'm gonna call you on this now. Finally, let's put this to rest. When I talk to you about your books, it's exactly like this, right? If you imagine sedevacantism as this big geographical area,
Yeah.
You've drawn the map, and it's a very good map, and it's got lots of details. It tells you where all the roads are, it tells you what the names are, it tells you where all the main churches and the avenues and everything, right? But when I ask you questions, it's not like you've covered every single minutiae in detail. So when I ask you questions, it's like, by the way, on this avenue in this street, there's a flower on the right-hand side of the road, and some people say it's a daffodil, some people say it's a rose. Can you happen to remember what the daffodil is?
Okay, my take on almost all the questions you've asked me. What's the one you did recently? Oh, I've got to go check now. I can't remember.
Go on then.
I'll go check what it was that you asked me recently. It was like, oh yeah, there was the date, the exact date. When did the church, stop being the Catholic Church? And I was like, you should know that because if you've read the thing, I've given you those dates, and you should have inferred from the context what was going on, which is like, well, after Pope Pius XII died, which was the 9th of October 1958, there's an interregnum. So you could say that it was still the church until the 28th of October. And the 28th of October, the fake, invalid, twice ignored election of the real Pope, Giuseppe Siri, was ignored, therefore invalidating the next one, and done by blackmail and a Freemason, and etc., etc., etc. That was the 28th of October 1958, when Roncalli climbed Gorgle-like on the chair of Peter. So you can definitely say from the 28th of October 1958, the Catholic Church no longer had a valid Pope. Now, it's true that that was not necessarily immediately obvious until, as I said, say 1965, which is why...
Is not having a valid Pope equal to all of like the following bishops and stuff being in schism?
Well,
I suppose that's the question that's picking it up.
Well, again, you can have a period of grace until, say, 1965, where you don't know who is and who isn't, right? There could be good guys there could be bad guys there, you don't know. But after 1965, which is definitely after all of Vatican II documents were produced and promulgated throughout the world, which is what the Vatican does, from that moment on, essentially from the last day, which I think was
officialized by then, right?
Yeah, but I think
it's good to nip that in the bud, because I've come across that with a few people who use it as a kind of gotcha question, like, well, you can't put an exact date on the entire schism. But
yes, you can.
But even without that, the other thing that occurred to me is that you never use that criticism with the Eastern Orthodox schism.
Yeah.
At what point exactly did the Eastern Orthodox break away from the Catholic Church? Can you give me an exact date? Because most people just give the year, right? You can't say, well, it happened at this hour, on this day, on this afternoon.
What's his name? Norwich, the guy who wrote the book on the popes, which I forget the name of now. He might actually have the actual date on it, because he did a sterling job. I was talking about him with David, because his wife's read the book. It's funny because it's such a brilliant book and such good history, but he invalidates his own Protestant point by page 9. I found that bit hilarious. The first time I picked it up and I read it, I was like, really? I was like, okay, I'm going to carry on reading the rest of it because I'm curious. And the rest of it is actually very good for the most part. Apart, of course, that he also goes on, one other thing he does throughout the book later on, is that he goes on about how the Crusaders were these like invading, maniac, violent people that just like were killing these poor, defenseless Muslims. I'm like, wait, what about the 400 years they like killed everybody and mass enslaved most of Europe? Like, that doesn't count, does it? Okay.
That argument comes up quite a lot now. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of Muslims about that as well, and they'll say, "Oh, you know, you Catholics were really brutal for the Crusades. You know, you invaded us." And I just have to ask, hang on a minute. What year did Islam come out? Did it come out after Christianity or before it? Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
So who
was and how did you convert people? Huh? Yeah. And how does it say you convert people in your book now to this day? Yeah. What is it again?
That was one of the first things I came across of Islam, because even before I was, when I was an anti-theist, right?
Yeah.
I still was of the mindset that, you know, if you're going to criticize people, you should still read their damn book. So I read the Bible. Like, I had a copy of Quran. Like, I was one of the few people who would criticize Islam amongst my friends who had actually read the Quran cover to cover. And you know, there's like an entire surah in there which is called Battle Spoils.
Yes.
And the whole surah is just dedicated to, if you win a battle, here's who gets what. You give the generals this amount of treasure, and these guys this amount of treasure. And it's like, it's religion of peace. Come on, guys.
Yeah. And it includes women and children, of course, as treasure.
Islam is a horrible religion. The more and more I'm learning about it, the more it's like,
you know,
slippery and sneaky.
What do they say? That all the world's the same? Because I've met devout Muslims that know their religion, that I've told to their face, you do realize if your religion takes over or mine or both at some point, you would have to kill me or vice versa. You know, we are incompatible ideologies, religions. And he like looked me square in the eye and he goes, yep, I know. If we become powerful, I'll definitely wipe you out. And I was like, well, if we become powerful, we'll definitely keep you in your little cage and not let you out.
I can respect that. Yeah.
You know, and I, full respect to the guy. And I've also met what I consider to be devout Churchian Muslims. In other words, Muslims that are not really on board with all of Islam and the implications of it, that are excellent people. You know, that are, you know, trustworthy, reliable, friendly, generous people. So, you know, it's like, you know, oh, just because I'm Protestant, you're saying I'm going to hell, you must hate me. I'm like, no, dude, you're a nice guy, but yeah, you're going to hell.
I had a great little event recently where I'm really rusty in my Italian. I've not been practicing languages at all for the last couple of months, but I went to like just a little kind of meet-up. So just a little practice session where we'd all practice talking Italian and English for an hour or two.
Sorry, my mosquito thing is falling off. Yep.
Okay, cool. And so it was just a complete mixed bag of people. And I'm in a very liberal city at the moment. And so there we were chattering away for a few hours. And it was basically, after everyone had left, there was just me, this like very liberal new age girl, and this guy who was like he actually explicitly said, no, I'm a Gnostic, like, but I'm like an occultist Gnostic. And I was like, okay. Right?
And because you don't have weapons in England, you couldn't run him through with your sword.
No. But to be fair, like, this is how the conversation ended. Like, firstly, when I told them both without flinching that I'm an absolute, like, are you a Catholic? Yeah. Like, what kind? I was like everything. So do you believe this is true? No, everything. Just name it. Like, I believe all of it. And there was one point in the conversation, like, they actually asked me lots of questions. They were very interested, actually, which was quite cool. They never really seemed like too irate about anything. But there was this one point where he said, so you telling me that if I believe everything that I currently believe, by your belief, I'm going to go to hell? And I just had to kind of look him in the eye and go, yeah, man, that's the rules. I don't make the rules, but that's the rules. And he kind of like paused for a second, had this like horrible scowl on his face, and then like kind of looked me up in the eye and just kind of goes, do you know what, man? I fucking respect that. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Do you want a beer?
Yeah.
Shook hands afterwards. It's quite cool, actually.
No, that's.
I'd like, good
stuff. The thing is, I can respect an enemy that's worthy of respect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can respect an honest enemy.
Yeah. You know? Well, or even dishonest in the sense that, you know, if he can poison my well, he'll poison my well, which is not
like
exactly.
deceives you for the purpose of being the enemy. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
but as long as when he's on his side of the fence and I'm on my side of the fence, with his swastika on or whatever it is, he's like communist flag or whatever. He's like, I'm going to try and kill you by every means possible and destroy you, your religion, your history, your ancestors, and everything that I can. I'll salt the earth when I'm done with you. And I'll be on my side going, good luck, buddy, because I'm going to do it to you first if I can.
Yeah, exactly.
And
at least on that page.
I can respect that enemy in terms of the fact that he's not pretending to be something else. In fact, I'll have respect for that hardcore Muslim that wants to destroy everything to do with Christianity. I'll respect that guy more than the guy who's like a churchian that says, oh, no, you should just turn the other cheek when somebody's raping your wife, and the death penalty is evil.
Have you seen the movie 12 Angry Men?
I think I might have, but I'm not sure.
It's probably one of my favorite movies now, because it's literally, firstly, it's brilliant because it was like made in the 50s.
Oh no, then I haven't.
It's just a movie about 12 men. Basically, there's a court case. The whole court case is about whether this kid has committed murder or not. And they just have to decide whether he has. They're a jury, right?
Yeah.
And basically, just the whole film is just, there's no crazy cinematics, no car explosions. It's just 12 guys, black and white, in a room having a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's fucking amazing.
Okay.
And basically, there's this one guy in there who is just really in a rush to go see the most recent baseball game. So he's just trying to get out of the shop as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And at one point he puts his hand up and says, yeah, I think the kid's guilty because everyone else thinks it. So he's just like, can't wait to get out of it. And there's another point where because the tide starts to turn, he goes, oh, now I think he's innocent. And this guy just looks him in the eye. And my favorite part of the film is he just goes, what kind of fucking man are you?
Yeah.
Right? You're telling me everyone else in this room has either said guilty or not guilty because they believe it's true, or they hate the kid, or they don't hate the kid, or whatever, they think he's innocent. But you are just here so that you can go to a baseball game. Like, what the fuck, man? And I love that. Because that's it, isn't it? It's like,
unfortunately,
be passionate about truth, be passionate about falsehood, but just to be, I want to see the baseball game.
Unfortunately, the vast majority of the planet has now become that man.
Yeah.
That's the sad thing. That
Hey, Sarah.
Stinky says there was an attempt to reconcile the Eastern and Western churches in 1439, but it didn't take, thanks to the recalcitrant Ortho bishops. No, there were more than that. And there was one, I don't know if it's that one, but there was the Council of Florence or whatever, where they were all invited. And now, if you're invited to a council of the churches and you don't go, guess what? Your vote doesn't count, because a lot of Orthodox, so-called Orthodox bishops did go, and they agreed that yes, the Pope has primacy, blah blah blah, and all the other things. It was signed and agreed by a whole bunch of Orthodox bishops. So what did the other guys that didn't want to go? No, but I'm right, and I've got my own church, and blah blah blah. And guess what? It's Protestantism 101, isn't it? Orthodoxy. That's how it starts. Do you believe that Vlad Dracula's conversion to Catholicism was genuine? I didn't know he did convert to Catholicism. First time I heard of it. My take on Vlad Dracula's is that guy was sick. I have no doubt in my mind that the guy was not a good guy. What he did, a lot of people consider it necessary, and it may well have been in the grand scheme of things. But if you go and read the details of what actually he did, impaling babies, and it's just, it goes well beyond what was necessary. He impaled a guy that was one of his guards because watching the babies and children and mothers and whatever being impaled, pregnant women and all that, one of the guys that was standing next to him threw up. So he had him impaled as well for being weak of stomach and not being able to look at the horrific stuff that was going on in Passion. So yeah, slap weasel, burn it down, scatter the stone, salt the earth where it stood. Okay, I don't know what slap weasel is referring to, because I believe he's a protty, but whatever. Kill them all. God will recognize his own. Yeah, that's kind of sort of my attitude, but yeah. I think we've covered quite a few things. If there's anybody
We
that's
covered everything.
never, but if we'll talk about something. We'll come up with something. We'll give them a few minutes to come up with any other questions they might have. We've got 9 guys watching, 9 upvotes, and 1 downvote. We've got the
I suppose
old...
I could do a cheeky plug. 'Cause
Yeah, go for
I
it.
never do that, even on my own channel.
Go for it.
Just to give you an idea, because I can now announce free books this year. That I'm
Good.
not actually
Type
speaking
in
about
your
publicly.
Amazon, like you've got your author page or whatever. Put it in the
Let me
chat.
see if I can grab that from somewhere then. I don't know, but this last message I sent you on the chat, I'll chat privately with guests. How do I put it in the chat? I don't think I can.
Oh,
Yeah, I just can't access the chat unless there's an option here of some kind.
okay, well, I'm going to go and look for it. Let me just quickly go and find it.
Tony VC Lowe, so the letters VC, Lowe, Lowe. You should be able to see all my books on there quite easily.
Thank you both. Curious, what if someone like Vlad had a genuine conversion? What should be their future course of action? Life in solitude and prayer? Roshi, no, I think somebody like Vlad Impaler did have a genuine conversion, then I think that what he should do is spend the rest of his life try to make as many amends as he possibly could, which in his case would be impossible. But he should set up all sorts of, like, I don't know, orphanages and like places where widows can like be looked after and whatever. Slapweasel says you need to be a moderator to play something in the chat. Okay, let's just find out. That's not what happened. Oh, well, anyway, let's just go to Amazon. Tony VC Lowe. All right. His conversion was probably politically motivated, but as Catholics we should remain optimistic. Well, the thing is, he should have spent the remaining days of his life trying to make amends, which, as I said, was probably impossible in his case. Actually, not probably, undoubtedly impossible. But if his conversion was genuine, then yeah, he will eventually, get to heaven. Although some saints say that there are some people that will spend almost all of eternity in purgatory before they actually get released into heaven. So, maybe he's got a long time waiting, looking for him. Here we go.
Slapweasel, and I'm converting.
Oh, good God! Slapweasel is converting from Prati to Slapweasel. I think I want you as my next guest. I'm genuinely saying that. Ping me an email.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Ping me an email. I think the infiltration of the whole Vox club is approaching completion. Like, it's like when I started on the Dread Ilk Facebook group that used to exist. I was the only Catholic, never mind sedevacantist. I used to have these arguments that would go on for like 800 like comments. Like one guy got ejected because at the end of one of those 800 things he was like, well, at least I can hug my daughter. And I was like, yeah, don't worry, you're still a stupid evil bastard, and that'll never change. Eventually I will be able to hug my daughter, because this was when she was in Brazil and whatever. And then like he kept like doing just snarky stuff, and I just had zero respect for that guy from the beginning, because I could tell what he was. And then like people in the thing were like, oh, but you guys, you always like at each other's throats. And I'm like, yeah, well, but he's scum. Like who would do something what he did? Like, well, what did he do? I'm like, well, he said this. And they're like, no, I can't believe it. Everybody was like, he would never. I was like, really? Ask him in the thing. And he like, yeah, I did say that. And it was like, yeah, dude, you need to apologize. And then he just left. he said, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. And then he just like ducked. Okay, so here I've got you've got quite a few books. Let me just put that link.
Cool.
Oh, no, wait. Is that got all your stuff on it there?
I think it should do.
Okay, let me copy that. My computer's half asleep. Right, so it's got
the
Life
three
and
that
Truth,
I've done.
To Catch a Faith Catholic, God is Love, On Truth, Echoes of Eden.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So let me put that in there.
So I've done a fair bit of work on, because aside from sedevacantism, as you know, if in a sense, my primary interest is in objectivist philosophy. Now, I don't go into like huge amounts of details of all the philosophers and stuff, because for me, I think the idea of basic objectivist philosophy is very simple, but it's also extremely important, right? And the idea that came to mind recently was this idea that, the development of Christian doctrine, if you read that essay by Cardinal Newman, he basically says that when councils and stuff explicate the faith, people keep saying, "Oh, Catholics are adding stuff to the religion." And they're not adding stuff. It's just not everything was made explicit from the get-go, and all the other stuff was brought out into greater relief. And what often happens is this: it's like, here's this thing that everyone just assumed to be obvious, and then a bunch of people say it's not obvious anymore. So the church says, "Let's make it obvious again," right?
Yeah.
That's basically what happens. So one of the things that's occurred to me recently is like, I think that's basically happening with like the most basic truths, right?
Yes.
So in the sense
a man
that
cannot be a woman, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so it might seem, in some sense, I've wondered whether I've been wasting my time with writing books about how 2 + 2 = 4. That is kind of what I've had to do, right? That's at least what I've done.
Yeah.
And so the two most recent, the two philosophy works I did this year, which is Life and Truth and the essay On Truth, are all about that. Life and Truth is the one that you would have seen, which is all about the actual...
On Truth I've got here, and...
Yeah.
Let me just see.
Life and Truth is the other one.
Life and Truth, yeah.
Life and Truth is the longer one. It's more thorough. For me, I'm trying to do that kind of mathematically, step by step. It's by far the driest book I've written, and that might be saying something. But
so you use it to desiccate food and stuff when you just wave it over.
Exactly. I hear like the bacteria content of everything around it goes down, and that kind of thing. I use it to keep my pasta dry. So, but that one I had to do because it's like if you're doing philosophy, it's like maths, right? Where you've got to get all the equations in order and make sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed and make sure that the actual logic lines up properly.
Now, I'm a little bit worried because I don't think I've read that one.
You've read the prototype.
Okay.
That's the one that you read the prototype of.
Because just so you guys know, like Tony and I can go on like arguments with each other for about 5 hours on like a sentence. Because he's saying, and I'm saying, no, you've used the word truth and you need to define what it means. And now you've defined, and now you have to use the same definition. And it's like, so.
Well, you'll be happy to know then, because again, for the autists, it might be an absolute treat, because I literally start every single section of every paragraph with the dictionary definition. And I'm basically just saying, if A, then Y, then Y, then B, and then B.
But what dictionary? Is it that one
Oxford
there?
English Dictionary.
The 13-volume, okay.
It is that one.
Good.
Don't worry, I know. I've even got, here's how autistic...
Not the modern version, eh?
I've dedicated an entire chapter to explaining why I can use the dictionary to actually make the argument in the book. Right? So,
yes, good. Oh, good. That's the kind of weaponized autism we want to hear. Yeah.
So I've tried to be extremely thorough, but it is very dry. I understand that because it's laying the foundations of objectivist philosophy, and in particular, you would call it objectivist epistemology, really. But I've tried to make a direct connection between that and ethics because, it's something that you've always said, but it's deeper than most people might realize. If the model works, go with it.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of the book is that, look, the reason why that works is because reality sets the parameters of what can or cannot be possible.
Exactly.
Right? And so you can make a really direct connection between practicality and philosophy, which most philosophers just don't make.
I know.
Either because it should be really obvious. Like I think it was really obvious for people like Aristotle and Aquinas, for example.
It was still obvious for me when I wrote The Face on Mars. I put that at the back. It's like philosophy should be like a real thing.
Yeah, because it's a guide to life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not just something that's relegated to academia, which I've seen, even objectivist academics I've seen, who I've got respect for, still relegate it as kind of like an intellectual thing, whereas like, no, it actually affects everyone, everywhere, right? Anyway, so that's what I've done with Life and Truth, but then what I've done is I've taken, now that I'm happy with the foundation because I've done the equation and I've checked the the logic.
Mm.
I can now be a little bit more rhetorical and loosen myself up a bit and just talk a bit more directly. So if anyone's interested in that kind of thing, but they don't want to read something dry like that, then I've written On Truth, why relativism is modern suicidal evil nonsense.
Yeah.
To explain, look, this is just why objectivism must be true and nothing else can be. It's all just completely insane and retarded. So it's just they're both the same
Mate,
argument. But
I wish you the best, because I've been fighting that battle for precisely 54 years. So
hey, mate, look, I try to take Saint Bernadette's tack, which is my job is not to convince; it's only to inform. Right?
yeah, Slapweasel has just posted that link of all your books on Social Galactic.
Thank you very much, Slapweasel.
And he says it's no longer a search; it's a truthful need. Slapweasel, I definitely wanna have you on. So ping me an email, I'll set up a time.
Happy days. So God bless you, mate.
Yeah.
And so the other book that I wrote this year that I've released a week ago is title for that is God is Love.
Yeah.
And the whole point of writing that book is because actually, if you take the argument that I've explicated in Life and Truth, one of the things I try to make a connection to is the faculty of the fact that the objective truth exists, but you can actually make a direct logical connection between that and the existence of logos and telos, right? Because basically, if logic is functional at all, it must lead to the conclusion that a logos exists, because otherwise, what is logic relating to, right?
Sorry, I am listening, but the Slapweasel is saying no, he doesn't do interviews. I'm like, okay, call it what you like in a chat. So now these things are important. They're like people that are either have converted, like David, who's, I mean, it blew my mind that David has become Catholic, because with his story, it's just like wow, And he's not the only one. I mean, like I was actually went off it, but like in the original Facebook group, like there's quite a few of the so-called Red Ilk that have like secretly emailed me or sent me a message and say, I'm actually a Catholic now, but I don't know any other Catholics, and I sort of thought, well, you're not the only one, and it's like, do you want to know who some of the other ones are, or can I tell them or not? And they're like, some are like, yes, some are like, no, are you sure? Because they'll out me. It's like, like being a Catholic nowadays, like you're gonna get stoned or something,
I feel like I think both David alluded to and Farmer Grady, who obviously both liked for a while. Honestly, is said, like, even when we've drawn towards Catholicism, it's so hard to live that way because so much of the Protestant milieu is so antagonistic to it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like all of my friends are not only they're not Catholic, but they're like anti-Catholic.
Yeah, that's what Farmer Grady said. He said, I've never even met a Catholic. I've never like even spoken to one. Yeah. It's like everything you're saying makes sense, but it's like, where would I start,
Yeah, completely rework my entire social landscape and stuff for it. So fair play to the guys.
Yeah, no, look, people that, mind you, I'm one of those people to a certain extent, but it's just I've always, I've used my abrasiveness as a filter because I'm a very sensitive soul, as you know.
And deeply,
yeah. Very deep. But as a result,
the gammas are going to use that. You know that, don't you?
Yeah,
they're
whatever.
Definitely going to use that.
As a result of my soft interior, I have had to develop a very powerfully strong armored exterior, which I use as a filter, because it's like, if that upsets you, if you can't deal with it, just bugger off. Just, it's the Batman concept. It's like, I don't care about educating you. I just beat you up until you stay away from me and everything I care about. It's like, so I've had that personality for a very long time. So not a lot of people would like come up to me and go like, yeah, you're like, because they'd be like, yeah, that's just, don't poke that guy. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
But even so, when I converted and when my wife converted, when we got baptized, the reception we got from the people that we knew was very sarcastic, sort of making a joke or whatever. And I was just like taking it in stride. It was, I'd let them say their silly little thing, and then I'd counter it with one of my rhetoric nukes, whatever it was. They'd be like, oh, so do you pray to a sky god now? I'm like, well, it's better than believing in the government like you do, which you depend on, by the way, because you're on welfare, right?
Yeah.
So me, the sky god dude, is paying the money that you get from the government that you hate. Yeah.
To
So it's
give
like,
you all the vaccines you need to keep you healthy.
yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
it really is. Slapweasel says, just because I'm a follower of Vox Day and Owen Benjamin doesn't make me a Protestant nor a bear. I need a foundation, and Catholics are the warrior class for Christ. Very good. Oh, I just assumed you were. I didn't. Yeah, that was probably my mistake. I don't know. I actually don't know what your denomination or religious beliefs are. I never knew. I just assumed you were a Protestant. If you are a Catholic, however, I don't know that you
If
can
you're
be.
on Social Galactic, it's like Occam's razor, isn't it? What are the chances going to be?
Yeah, and if you are a Catholic, I don't know that you can call yourself a follower of Owen Benjamin, because his heretic blasphemy is. Oh, I love you too, dude. I got no problem with you. Not too long ago, I found out Slapweasel mentioned it, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on? Why are you guys talking about me?" Apparently, I was rude enough, or I don't know what I did wrong exactly. I was probably calling out some Protestants or something. And on Social Galactic, you've got like a score of like popularity or something like that. Apparently, I lost a third of it as a punishment, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that happened. It's like, that's how much I care about the. And I think he got quite upset about it. He was like, you see, that's the thing. You're dealing with people like him. Like,
As you just said in the chat,
I'll still ban you from Social Galactic should the need arise. Yeah. I don't think that need will arise, but yeah. I think, was it Slapweasel? He was going to ban Fox's dad from the chat, from Social Galactic. Vox's dad has got some very funny theological. Actually, it's funny enough.
Yeah, he's definitely a character.
Yes, like
I wouldn't
Space.
necessarily say we all agree, but
Space Bunny said to me, "I can't wait to see you having a conversation with like Vox's dad." And I was like,
I would love to see that.
Like, dude, I'm not going there. I'm just going to ask him about computers and stuff like that. And she's like, coward. I'm like, no, I want to see. I want to see Theo having a conversation with his dad. And it's like, yeah, he shut it down the first time he tried. That's funny, yeah. Yeah, no, it's hello, Woolly Ram.
Happy days.
Yeah, that was him. Yeah, it was him. Yeah. So yeah, no, but that again, you see, that's where turn the other cheek. If I did whatever. I don't think I would do that, but if I did something that constituted a ban from Social Galactic, would you usually get a warning or two anyways? Cordless Fox's dad's theories are retarded. Yeah. I can't disagree with you there really, but anyway, I haven't even looked into them. I sort of surface skim read the generic concept, and I was like, yeah, never mind.
As all high IQ people will say, high IQ isn't everything.
No, and another thing, I've come to the conclusion that past about the 130 point of IQ, people exhibit a level of, whether it's Asperger's, autism, eccentricity, call it what you like, but I don't think you can go past 130 without having some kind of glitch. I don't know if it's a glitch. It's not always necessarily a glitch, but it's a definite, little cross.
It's like a systemization quirk or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like, and it's everybody. What I have found the difference is in women, it plays out in a perhaps understandably more crazy way. It's like, if it's a guy and he'll usually be like, I used to work with this guy who couldn't handle color on spreadsheets. You couldn't put any color on a spreadsheet, you'd freak out.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't do that. I'll just wipe out the whole spreadsheet. I'll delete it. Like, it took me a year, but by the end of the year, he was using color on a spreadsheet because I just knew. I knew his little autistic mindset. I knew where it was coming from, and I was like, I just sent him a spreadsheet with just one column of yellow. He's like, oh, I know you don't like colors, but I did the yellow because it's easy to see this aspect of this project we're on. And he's like, oh. By the end of the year, he was doing it. So like, yes. Slapweasel says, I've always enjoyed your takes, Kirkin. Woolly Ram, turn the other cheek applies personally, not to your duties or people you're bound to protect. You're pretty safe. The world is is glitching constantly of late. Yeah. So with women, when they have like over like a 130 IQ, it's like it plays out in really odd ways. They might be really specific about beans or how they cook or how they make tea, and the milk has to go in first. Or it becomes like something like what? Like my wife tried to explain this to me. She's got this thing where she counts like with her feet. She counts like steps and the size of rooms, and like she's tried to explain this to me about 10 times. Okay, I still don't get it. I don't exactly know what she's doing, because I'm like, wait, so you start on, are there lines? It's like, yeah, if there are lines, then you count the lines, and it's like, then you have to count the steps for the lines. And I'm like, but what if they're odd? And like, well, no, then you start with the other foot. And it's like, she's got this, it's like, if you could extract that, it would be a huge map of like rules of how she's doing this. And she's apparently doing this constantly in her head at any given time. So she's doing other stuff, but she's like still tick, 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 tick. And I'm like, that is insane. That's crazy. Like how, you're obviously, she's not a mental defect or something. The funny thing is, like, I see our kids, like our youngest one, the little one, who's now starting to walk a bit. She was like, when she was sitting in her chair and that before she was walking, she was constantly like spinning her ankles, like constantly just wiggling her toes. And I was like, she's got your thing there. And she's like, yep. It's like, can we direct it into like something useful? I don't know, like, like counting with her toes or something. It's very interesting. But like, Vox has got a high IQ, and he says he's got no trace of autism whatsoever. Nah. I see things that he does, or things that'll tick him off. That we've all got them. We've all got our little triggers and whatever. But there are certain things that I've noticed that it's like, oh, he's got a little bit of a blind spot there, or like a preference, or call it what you like. I don't even know what to call it, because I know I definitely have them. Like my daughter has them. It's like my daughter is one of the messiest people on earth. But if you're doing something like lining up, you say, oh, let's just put the glasses out, and you like line them up, and they're like different sizes or something, you can see her start twitching. She's like, well, no, these are not the right way around. No.
Yeah.
Slapweasel says there is a hierarchy. If you refuse to understand it, you may not understand the basis for morality. Yeah, I'll say that's fair. Cordell says Kurgan's takes consist of taking heads. Yeah, we all have a hobby, No, but Woolly Ram says Fox is a massive nerd. I don't think he denies that.
No, he's quite open about his nerdiness.
Yeah. I've actually had a very interesting conversation with him about the missionaries. Because before it came out, he said this is one of the funniest books he's ever read. And then I bought it, I've got the missionaries, I read it. And I was like, I don't think I even cracked a smile throughout the whole thing. I was just like, well, keep in mind, I've lived in Africa for 25 years. So I was like, well, it's some fictionalized version of what actually sort of happens in Africa, sort of thing. And then I thought, like, why, Vox is a smart guy. Like, why does he think this is funny? So I reread it, and I started to understand. I said, okay, well, keep in mind, he's probably never been in Africa, and he doesn't, choose to hang out places like, third world countries as a general rule. And I'm like, oh, I think he's seen, And then I called him up. I think we spoke about it, or I can't remember if it was an email or a conversation. And I said, but, dude, are you like, do you think that thing is funny because of the clever sort of language in it? And he goes, yeah, I'm a massive snob when it comes to like literature. It's like, that's why I find it so funny. And I was like, oh, see, I'm like a practical guy, so I didn't find that funny at all, because it was like, that's just shit that happens in Africa, man. It's not even out there, A book that I found funny in a practical way, because it's true, is my dad's book, Life and Death in Africa. And, for those of you that are interested, he's got the same name as me. That's a hilarious book, but it's also tragic and sad and really happy. It's like, because it really is about life and death in Africa. And it's like, man, if you've been, I've lived through most of the things he writes about with him, because I was there for a lot of it. And it's like, it's absolutely true to life. There's no fiction in there at all. And it's hilarious because there's stuff that happens in there that you sort of think, what did that, you know? If you don't know Africa and if you don't know my dad, you might think, oh, he's probably exaggerating. I swear to God, on my head, if anything, the man has toned down a lot of stuff because, you know, he's a boomer, he wants to live a long life, and he probably wants to spend a lot of it outside of jail. So, it's like, because I know there's a lot more behind some of the stories that he's just like, that just becomes too messy to explain and like justify and whatever. But that's a funny book to me. So yeah, Vox doesn't deny at all his quirks. I think he's very honest about them. Woolly Ram, he has a tick when it comes to writing, trying to maintain a neutral tone. Yeah, I found his... but he says it himself, you know, he says, oh, my writing is pretty pedestrian and utilitarian. And in my opinion, so is his editing, because he's edited some of my short stories and stuff. And he took out chunks of stuff that I understand, you know, he had a limit of length as well and whatever, and I get it. And he was basically saying, look, the stuff you're trying to put in there is like too rarefied for most people to get it. It's a good story on its own merits, just go with the main flow. But for me, the whole point of it was kind of like, dude, the little side bits that are like, that's the real story, you know? Yes, you got a story for the average guy who just reads black and white stuff, but there's other stuff there for people who can see a little bit beyond it. So, yeah. He read too much as a child. Yeah, that's not an excuse. I read plenty as a child, like lots and lots. So, yeah. It's a quirk.
I didn't read anything as a child.
You don't read anything now.
No, I don't, to be fair. Yeah.
But anyway, I think, what is it, 2 hours now? Yeah, we've gone 2 hours 20. So, as usual, just a short stream, just to get the basics across.
So yeah, I mean, I suppose we're gonna have to wrap up now anyway.
Yeah.
There's a pilgrimage tomorrow, which is
Oh
cool.
yes, in the UK.
Yeah, in the UK, so that's going to be quite nice.
Is there a link
one
or
of the other
something
things
you
we've been
can
able
put
to
in the
pull off
chat, just in
in the
case
last
people,
year.
you know, because there's like, whatever,
There's
10...
a website that I've set up to list everything.
Yeah, put that on the chat,
Yeah, if there
because...
happens to be anyone here in the UK, type in... I can't.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You type in ukmasses.com into the chat.
Okay, let's just see that.
Then this website covers everything that's going on in the UK from a sedevacantist point of view.
ukmasses.com. Yeah, I should probably do a better job of, like, before we have these things, like, having all the links. Welcome, there we go. Oh, it's a very nice looking site, actually. So there you go, for any British people. Because, you know, we only have like whatever 20 something guys on the live thing, but like by a few hours there'll be a couple of hundred people who watch it usually.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning there then, if it's of any practical importance, that I've set that website up to list all of the sedevacantist masses that happen in the UK.
Yeah.
The pilgrimage is happening tomorrow, so I suppose it's late notice for most people, but that'll probably happen every year, that one in Glastonbury. But otherwise, you know, there's a Telegram group that you can join through that, which is probably the best, most direct way to get all of the updates. But I update that at the beginning of every month to show all the masses that are going to happen for that month. And the other cool thing is that we've actually got such a spread now that you can get to a Sedi Mass if you're in basically any part of the UK.
Yeah.
Maximum like 3 hours.
I see you've also got like a little map, which is very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's got a
the
map.
cool thing, if you look at that map, is that at the very start of the year, there was only one pin on there, and it was at the very bottom of the UK. And now you can see there's like 5 pins.
Yeah, there's 5 pins now. Yeah.
We've been very lucky.
That's awesome. Tony, thank you very much. I suggest everybody. Oh, let me just get your YouTube channel. I'll put that link in the chat as well.
Oh yeah.
What is that? Is it
TVC?
TVC. Yeah, you've dropped the L, have you? Let's see.
Yeah, it was a rhetoric thing. You know, 3 is better than 4 because autism and all that kind of stuff.
YouTube. Oh, there's a lot of. We've got TVC News Nigeria live, but I don't think that's you.
Mate, okay, what you'll have to do is if you just type in the name of my video, for example, so type in like sedevacantism visualized, and then it will probably be like the 3rd video or something.
Visualized. Let's see what comes up. There we go. I do.
Boom.
I did enjoy Peter Dimmon's like little YouTube thing with. You know, he did that debate with some SSPX guy. I wasn't even a nose.
Oh yeah, he did that on Pints with Aquinas, didn't he? That was quite good.
He just ripped that guy to little shreds. Yeah, it was just pitiful, really. I mean, even people that like don't agree with the demons at all, or not sedevacantists in any way, shape, or form, were like, "Dude, you got wrecked." It's just
yeah. And everyone looked at that and went, I know that we're supposed to be right, but didn't we just lose the argument?
Yep. Here we go.
So that really sparked it, which was quite good.
That's Tony's YouTube channel, where you can find out his very good videos on not just sedevacantism, but the Socratic method, creativity, definitions, and of course on both Kurgan TV and somewhere else where he'll probably tell you Tony has done a whole series on the trivium.
Yeah. So you can find the trivium stuff on Kurgan TV. I mean, long term, I'm thinking of reworking that because I've learned so much more about it since.
Yeah.
The trivium is a whole nother level of conversation, but I'm learning more and more that is just an absolute gold mine of truth. What I've done with the Socratic method, just to mention that briefly, because that was a recent development, is I do cover the Socratic method on KTV, but I only cover that in terms of the videos, right? So I get information for it. What I'm now doing is I'm now actually running live courses where I do like interactive sessions in the Socratic method. So if anyone wants to actually, if you go onto that course, then you'll get the Socratic method and all the videos and all the details, but I'll also allow you to actually practice with me or with a partner for the course of like 6 to 8 weeks, and that will allow you to actually learn, not just learn about, but learn and practice the Socratic method.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Otherwise, I've got videos. I've got a podcast as well, but that's all on the YouTube channel too.
So yeah, I've got a podcast because there's some awesome guy who's putting like all my videos in audio and like up in, I forget where. And also the thing I should have said right at the beginning.
A lot of your stuff is actually on Spotify.
Yeah, there is. And actually the thing I should have said right at the beginning, but as usual, my marketing acumen is that I've actually opened subscriptions to this channel, and there's like 3 different levels. So if you're interested in that, either go on the blog, which I've done a blog on it today, which explains a bit more, or if you go on the community tab of my YouTube channel, it tells you there like what it's about. But basically there's 3 levels. There's like $2.99, $5.99, and $22.99 if you're nobility. And the whole point is I just want to try and make the streams and the blog and the Kurganet and all the various sites, well, not all, because Kurgan TV is quite expensive, but at least the generic sites and the streaming like not cost me money, rather than and it's like, it's not that much. It's like about about $100 a month will probably cover the basic sites. Kurgan TV is more expensive, which is why it's higher. But if we get enough subscriptions by amount of money rather than numbers of people, so if we get like 100 guys subscribing at the $22.99, then all those guys are gonna get like Kurgan TV for free, and that's what I'm leaning towards. That oh, thank you, Slap Weasel. I'm leaning towards the thing that people that are subscribed, obviously the guys who subscribe at the higher level will get the access earlier, but there's like various steps. The first step is to like break even. The second step is like, okay, if we make a bit of money, then we offer people freebies. And another thing that I want to offer at pretty much all the levels, depending on how many people come on, is like that the guys who subscribe can decide the topic, or maybe can have a live stream with me where we talk about something that interests them. So that's another little sort of perk. And then eventually, when there's enough people, there probably will be like members only videos, but that's gonna come in a bit later. So that's basically it. I think we've punted everything we're gonna punt right at the end, as all good marketers do.
Yeah. I'm sick of your face now anyway, so let's call that a night. Yeah.
Well, thankfully you've got a crappy video, so your face has just been a blocky blur for most of it, thank God.
Well, you got my nice soothing dulcet tones anyway, so at least you got the best of it.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here. God bless every one of you, and
God
thank
bless
you,
you slap-headed fuck.
Thanks, Tony. Good night to you all. Good night. Bye.
God bless you.